Hi, this is Dale Lear, designer of TRS-80 Color Baseball, and you're listening to CoCoTALK.
This is CoCoTALK, the world's leading live talk show featuring the Tandy color computer. It's time to drop your socks, grab your real-time clocks, and let's rock.
CoCoTALK is rocking the 8-bit world, keeping the Tandy flame alive. We may be mocked, but we'll never stop, cause CoCoTALK is rocking the 8-bit world.
Welcome to CoCoTALK, episode 246. Today we have special guest Randy Kindig.
CoCoTALK is rocking the 8-bit world, keeping the Tandy flame alive. We may be mocked, but we'll never stop, cause CoCoTALK is rocking the 8-bit world.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, Mark, I stepped on your toes there.
That's okay.
We got a great show in store for you. We've got a great special guest, and we've got a mediocre panel. So we'll go around the room real quick and say hi to those who are here. Starting with myself, Stevie Stroh. We have your streamer and engineer for the day today, Mark Bosley. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
Rick Euland's with us. Hello, Rick. Our resident Apple guy who's petting a cat, Mark Overholzer, is here. Hello. He's got a garage. Ron Delvaux is here. Our Game On segment host, Canadian Retro Things, is here. Ken Waters. How's it going, eh?
Good, eh?
Our foreign correspondent and news anchor, L Curtis Boyle, is here. How's it going with you, eh?
Good day, everyone, and welcome.
All right. Maker of many things with switches and cables involved, Jason the Coco Man Reichert is here. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Exiled in Paradise, Alan Murphy's here.
Howdy, howdy, everyone.
The Thunder from Down Under, Nicholas Marentes is here. Good eye, Nick.
Howdy, partners.
And a guy who's got enough enthusiasm for the entire state of Nebraska, David Ladd's here. Hey, David, how are you?
Hello, everyone. I hope everybody's ready today. Are you? Let's get moving.
All right. So there's the usual suspects. And we have a special guest today. But real quick, we'll say hi to who's in the live chat, too. Jim Rye is out there. Tom Eric Gunderson, Kevin Holloway, Frederick Pravancha, Mikey, Tim Franklin, David Ladd, Kevin Holloway, Paul Shoemaker, Exile in Paradise, Frederick D. Pravancha. So the live audience is already out there. Hello, live audience. And then we will get into, without wasting any more time, just getting right into the best part of the show, other than the closing credits, our special guest today, a legend in the vintage computing podcast arena, the gold standard for how vintage should be presented on all forms of media. Please welcome none other than Mr. Randy Kindig. Hey, Randy.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure at all. No pressure at all. Wow. That's quite an intro, Steve.
He's standing up for us.
Standing ovation for Randy. Woo!
Whoa.
Oh, in turn, he will stand for this. Usually people don't stand for our antics, but that's great.
You said a mediocre panel. Looks like an awesome panel to me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are you watching a different show?
Yeah, I've got another screen over here that you can't see. So. How are you guys?
Good. Thanks for being here, Randy. I'll just start off by saying how all this came together, because I remember that conversation we had at VCF Midwest. Don't put me on here. Nobody needs to see me, Mark B. God, I'm gonna lose viewership. But I think the first time I met you was at the first Tandy assembly, which I believe you were involved with in some degree, at least promoting it. And that's the first time I met you. And so I'd seen you maybe 2 or 3 times at some events. And then at this most recent VCF Midwest, I was talking to you about the bumper you had recorded for me. And you said, "Oh, I forgot I recorded that." I'm like, "Yeah." And then I just said, "Hey, would you like to be on the show?" And I think you said something like, "I've interviewed so many other podcasters, but nobody's interviewed me." So we're honored to have you. And thanks for doing the show with us.
Yeah. I think it was I think I knew you before Tandy Assembly started, but we first met, I think, at that first one. And I was one of the members of the group that set that up, at least the first 3, I think. It was great meeting and great seeing you at VCF Midwest. Yeah,
it was that event this year turned out really well. I thought, despite having to wear a mask and everything else, great attendance. Good times. Curtis, do you have questions? I know I'm going to have a million questions as we go through this, but do you want to start with the usual
standard
boilerplate initial questions?
Sure. So, Randy, I guess first question, and I realize you have covered some of this on your podcasts, and we'll kind of get into all those in a little bit here, but just for people who have not seen or heard you before. So how did you get into computers? What was the first computer you ever used, and what was the first computer you ever owned?
First computer I ever used. I was actually in the engineering program at Purdue University. And I guess the first computer I used would have been a mainframe. I actually had a programming class in Fortran and had to create my cards and take them up to the desk, and they would run it through and give me the results and that sort of thing. So as far as the first computer I actually ever got my hands on, that's probably the one that I ended up buying, my first real machine for home. I guess the first thing I probably programmed on was my TI 58C calculator. It has programming capability. So that's the first thing that I used that a lot in my engineering curriculum. But the first home computer I got was the TRS-80 Model 1 from Radio Shack in 1979. I was getting ready to graduate from Purdue, and my wife surprised me with that as a graduation present, brought it home from Radio Shack. She knew, I had been going into the store a lot and playing with the machine and drooling over it. And she brought it home, and I was really, really excited to pull that out and start playing with it. It was awesome.
Do you know why she picked that particular one? Because at that time, you would have had the PET, you would have had the Apple II, you might have had, the Model 2 would have been too expensive. You might have had some of the Ataris, depending on the time of the year.
The Atari wasn't out yet. This was this was early in 79. And, there really weren't any other machines that were as, easy to get your hands on. As available. I mean, obviously there were the PET and the Apple II were machines that were out at the time, but you just didn't see them in the places that I frequented anyway. So,
and the Apple II was quite expensive at that time.
It was
another.
Yeah. And the one that I got was just the level 1 4K machine. So it was the
base.
I was still a poor college student, so couldn't really buy anything too expensive.
I think a lot of us can relate to that. We started with 4K Coco 1s just a year or two later. So similar story. Now, just a quick question, but could you go back? You said you used some mainframes in university. Would that have been like DEC VAXs or IBM 360s, or what kind of mainframe do you remember?
I don't even recall. I don't even know.
But you obviously had an interest in the programming side of things. Like when you say you're an engineer, I'm assuming a software engineer is kind of what you shot for? Or
no, actually, nuclear engineering was the curriculum that I was in, and all engineers had to take a programming class, for this Fortran class specifically, actually. And so that's how I took the class. And then once I took the class, I realized that I really enjoyed computers, and I did go ahead and complete my nuclear engineering curriculum, but immediately went into a master's program for computer science because, it just was clear to me that that's something that I wanted to get into more.
Okay. And obviously you kept up with that, doing retro computing podcasts there. Did you ever do anything else with your nuclear training?
So the first job I had was with an electric utility. At the time, it was called Public Service Indiana, and they were in the process of building a nuclear plant in southern Indiana. So I was hired to work on that project, and I did for about a year, and then I got into the IT department back at corporate office again, and so I moved back to Indianapolis, and really kind of got away from. Well, I still supported nuclear applications for a while until 1984. They canceled the power plant build because it was getting too expensive and they couldn't get it finished. And luckily, by that time, I was fully entrenched on the IT side and I was well into my master's program at that time in computer science. So that's kind of how that came about.
That's cool. I didn't realize you actually got to keep up with that there for a few years anyway. So
for a couple of years. Yeah.
Cool. So you got into the programming side. Did you ever get in the hardware side, like designing your own circuit boards and that kind of stuff too? Or
I never did. I was always more of a software guy. When I left the electric utility, I actually went to a consulting firm, and I was a developer, mainly Java and .NET development. So I was always on the software side, and I did have, during my, again, all engineers had to take an electronics course, and I really enjoyed the electronics course, but I did not take that further. So I am not great when it comes, I don't know anything about designing circuit boards or any of the hardware side of it, really.
Okay. And then obviously from the Antic podcast, I'm assuming you must have gotten an Atari at some point after you got your Model 1. Is that correct? And whenabouts would that have been? Which one?
So that was about 1981. So I'd had my TRS-80 Model 1 for a couple years. And at that point, it was getting a little long, and I had upgraded it, right? So it was a level 2 16K machine by then. I didn't have an expansion interface or anything like that. Still early in my career. Yes, right. Still cassette based. But I could tell it was getting a little long in the tooth, and there were a lot of machines out now, at that time then by 81 that had color graphics and, just were more powerful than the TRS-80 Model 1. And so I decided to trade in my Model 1 and get something different. And so I looked around a lot to try to figure out, well, what machine should I get? Commodore the Commodore VIC-20 was out. The Commodore 64 wasn't out yet, but the VIC-20 was out. It's certainly something that I took a look at. It still seemed, maybe not as powerful as I wanted. I don't remember how closely I looked at the CoCo. Obviously, I was a Radio Shack guy because I had the Model 1, but at that time it would have been the CoCo 1. Yeah. And I guess for whatever reason, I wasn't that impressed with the CoCo 1.
Probably the keyboard.
Yeah, the keyboard was probably a good piece of that. Otherwise, I probably would have stuck with Radio Shack because I really enjoyed my Model 1 and spent a lot of time at Radio Shack and really liked their products. But when I looked around, to me at that time, the Atari 400, 800 were out, and those were, when I looked at it, they were just fabulous machines. They were optimized to work with their television set, wonderful colors and sound, and to me, that's just the machine that made sense at that particular moment in time, and that's how I ended up getting into the Atari world.
So, which of those two did you get then? 400.
Yeah, I got an 800. I wasn't fond of the keyboard on the 400. It was cheaper, but yeah, I didn't like the membrane keyboard. And so I did end up getting an 800. I couldn't afford to get the floppy drive and all of that, all the additional stuff with it at the time. So it was still cassette based when I got it. But
48K RAM, I'm presuming, or? Or did you get 16?
Yeah, I actually was able to get it with 48K from the beginning, because by that time, by 81, you could get a 48K machine. I think it was $7.99 or something like that. It was, whereas it would have been that amount earlier just for 16K. So yeah, I did get a 48K machine.
And I'm assuming at some point you eventually got the disk drive, maybe a year or two later.
That's about right. Yeah, I did. It actually took me a little while to get a cassette player, because I didn't even initially have a cassette player with it. So, as you might imagine, that's not much fun to type programs in, and then as soon as you turn it off, they're gone. Yeah, they're totally gone.
Unless you write them down in a notebook, which is exactly what I did for the first year.
Yeah. So, it didn't take me long to get a cassette player. And like you said, probably a year later, I got my first 810 floppy drive for it, and loved it. It was great having a floppy drive. It was so amazing.
Now, one question I have for you, because you came from the engineering background rather than, the video game background, playing the Odyssey 2 or Pong or Atari 2600 or whatever else. The Atari was, of course, very strong for games with the Pokey chip and, the dedicated sound sprites, etc. Did you buy it particularly for the programming software engineering side because you saw a lot of potential, or did you get it for gaming, or both?
I did not get it for gaming. It just, for me, it was all about what is the machine capable of? What sort of power does it have? What kind of software does it have? I definitely wanted color graphics, not because of gaming in particular, but just because, I don't know. I wanted color graphics, and the sound capabilities. That's something the TRS-80 Model 1 never had either. And
unless you bought a bunch of add-ons like an Orchestra 85 or something.
Yeah, but I've never been a gamer, and it wasn't because of gaming that I bought that machine. It was just more the power of the Atari.
Now, were you ever into performing or writing music? Did the music chip appeal to you as a musician style thing, or it was just strictly the software engineering?
I have zero musical aptitude, so it definitely wasn't anything to do with music.
There is a music question coming up a little bit later too. So.
Did you program on the Atari, and did you do it in BASIC or Assembler or some other language?
Well, yeah, initially, that's a good question. Initially, I did BASIC because I had a BASIC cartridge with the machine. As you know, the 400 didn't have BASIC built in, but I did get the BASIC cartridge when I got the machine, and obviously I couldn't have done much with it without that. But because MemoPad doesn't do much, but it was probably a year after maybe 2 years after I got the 800 that I started delving into assembly language. So I learned 6502 assembly. I had done the same thing on the Model 1, probably a year after I had gotten it. I learned the Z80 and had written some software. I actually wrote a program on the Model 1, to get back there for a second, in assembly language, and actually posted that to a magazine to see if I could get it published, but they turned me down.
Do you remember what the program was about?
Yeah, it was sort of like a Tron-like game, the light cycle sort of game, where you have a line you're trying to move around the screen, and it's a 2-player game, and the other one, and then you're trying to block the other person in, that sort of thing. It was fun. I really enjoyed writing it, but it apparently wasn't good enough to get published.
So I guess that brings up another question too. You were a software engineer by trade. Did you actually publish software on any of the platforms that you went on, just as part of the hobby, or did you just strictly just do it for fun?
No, it was just strictly for fun. I basically did the same thing on the Atari. So when I got the Atari and I learned assembly language there, I did write some software. I remember it was a software it was kind of like what we use today, a really, really primitive form of like PowerPoint. It would allow you to take graphics created on the Atari and create like a presentation or a sequence of images out of it. And I remember sending that into I can't remember if it was Antic or Analog magazine, which were the big Atari magazines of the time. But again, it wasn't good enough. And I didn't take it personally.
Very judgmental, these Atari publishers.
I know.
If only they could see you now.
Right.
Right.
Just out of curiosity, not having owned an Atari, but I had friends who had them. The thing I liked about the CoCo was the basic manual made it very user-friendly to learn the language, and it gave you great examples. Do you remember, was the basic manual with the Atari Basic, was it decent?
Yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah, I remember it being pretty good. It wasn't particularly hard to learn Atari Basic. It wasn't Microsoft Basic like it was on the TRS-80, but so it had its nuances. But I remember the documentation being pretty good there.
I remember a friend of mine doing something in Basic back, we were in middle school or high school or something, where he would write a program, and then when he needed more memory, he would have his program erase some of the lines, because he would have it print out the line numbers and then just hit enter, and basically delete those lines from the program and from memory to free up more memory. So it was almost like self-modifying code in Basic, where it would delete some of the program to free up RAM for more of the program to run. And I thought that was the wildest thing I'd ever saw, where you can actually see it on the screen, kind of self-destructing parts of the program.
I do remember using both of my machines. So I was in school at the time, right? I was working on my master's program in computer science. And I remember using both of my machines, my Model 1 and the Atari 800, for various aspects of that. I remember, and even my Model 1, I remember using for work a little bit, because there were some calculations that we were wanting to do for the nuclear plant that we were building. And, I said, what, I've got a machine at home. We didn't really have, we just had mainframe based stuff at work. And it was easiest for me to just take that home and try to do some of those calculations on my TRS-80 Model 1. So I actually did that. And that was kind of cool that I could use, my Model 1 for work. And then for the Atari 800, we actually had I remember buying a 300 baud modem that connected to the joystick port on the Atari, because modems were pretty expensive at the beginning. But it was just a 300 baud modem, but it did allow me to dial into the university's computer and actually do some of my homework then from my Atari over that connection. So that was kind of cool. And I remember writing a couple of papers on my Atari and printing them out on my 1027 printer and turning them in, from that, instead of typing them out on a typewriter.
Cool.
Well, you guys are dredging up memories here. Wow.
You've probably done
Kindig,
more.
This is your life.
Yeah, you've probably done more you probably did much more productivity on that machine than the average user, because I'm sure a lot of people got it just to play games. The fact you were, writing software and writing papers and solving problems, that's you were a power user on the Atari.
Well, I was trying to be. That's why I had a computer. It wasn't. Yeah. It really wasn't to play games on. I really wanted it to. And I think part of that stemmed from my interest in computer science. And I did end up getting a master's in computer science. And we learned a lot of different languages. And, I always saw the computer as a real productivity sort of thing rather than a gaming sort of thing.
Yeah, I did some of that a little bit later than you, but we actually we had a PDP 1134 at work, and then it kept dying because it was getting hard to get parts and super expensive to fix. So I ended up bringing my CoCo in as an emergency, and it ended up working so well. They ended up buying a completely decked out CoCo system. We ran it there for like 10 years. So I guess I would be a power user too. So how long did you stay? What?
You just brought back another memory too.
Go ahead.
You asked me what computer I actually physically ever first used.
Mm-hmm.
It might actually have been a PDP-8, because I remember I was taking a class that involved learning programming, and they had a PDP-8 there, and actually had to step up to the, you had to toggle all the bits on the machine for each instruction, and then move to the next one and do that sort of thing. So I actually did that.
You'll run stop.
Sorry, that's just a random thought that came out there after.
No, that's fine.
It sounds like you lost your bandwidth once or twice. You sound kind of broke up. I don't know if you can adjust the rabbit ears on your Wi-Fi or not, and get the little tinfoil flags out on them. But
yeah, I apologize for that. Am I sounding okay right now?
Yeah, you sound okay. Every now and then you kind of went into the matrix for a second, but at the moment you sound good.
I'm out in the boondocks of Indiana, and I don't have a lot of options when it comes to internet. So please let me know if things don't sound right or if I need to adjust something, because I can.
Well, you turned red.
Okay, we can still hear you though, so that's fine. The audio is the most important part.
Yeah. So where did you go after the Atari? I guess is my next question. Did you go to PC or Mac or Unix, Linux, or?
My next machine was actually, I stuck with Atari and got the Atari ST. That would have been 1985 when I got the ST. So I had the 8-bit for quite a while, the Atari 8-bit, for probably from 81 to 85.
Then you got which one, a 520 or a 1040 or?
520. Yeah, it had just come out, and I don't even think the 1040 was available at the very beginning. And I bought my 520 at a Toys R Us.
Wow.
It was on the shelf at Toys R Us, and I got a disk drive with it at the time as well, and the monochrome monitor.
That's hard to imagine, a computer at a toy store, but
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, you could get the Ataris at Sears, which was like a multi-purpose department store. So I guess, it's not a
we had them up here. Amigas and Atari STs actually were available at Canadian Tire of all places. So
really? Okay.
Yeah. Not for too long. They kind of just dabbled in it. They didn't just sell tire and car parts. They sell all kinds of stuff. But for a while they dabbled. Because even sold computer magazines for the various machines out in the mid 80s too. So but that was an experiment that only lasted about 2 years.
They also sold the Coleco Atom there too.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. I don't think Toys R Us actually carried the Atari line that long either. But at the time that I bought it, they had them on the shelf.
Now, were you sticking with Atari mainly because you were familiar with Atari as a company and kind of like you would have been at Radio Shack before, or was it because the ST had features that you really wanted? I'm guessing the Amiga probably wasn't quite out yet.
It came out very close to the same time, but I think it was more of a loyalty to Atari. And because I was involved in a lot of different Atari groups in Indianapolis, a lot of people had already migrated to the ST, and I had seen them and saw how powerful they were. And I don't think I really even investigated the Amiga before I bought the ST.
Okay. And I'm assuming you did some programming on the ST. Did you do that was a bigger machine that obviously you had stuff like C compilers and stuff. So what kind of programming language did you use there? Did you actually learn 68000 assembly language or?
I didn't. I never really did program the ST like I did the earlier machines. I never did learn 68000 assembly language. Any programming I did was either in Pascal, because we had used Pascal heavily in my master's program, or in BASIC on that machine.
Okay, so at this point, it was becoming more of a tool than the interest of programming type thing.
It was, yeah. I'd say that's a good way to put it.
So what did you primarily use the ST for? Then, were you writing papers on it? Were you doing custom programming to help with your work, or what exactly were you using it for?
Yeah, I was, I got that in 85. I was still working on my master's program, so I still used it for school. For work, I didn't really use it for work because right about that time we had started getting IBM PCs, and there was no compatibility there whatsoever, either file format wise or software wise, between the two. But I did enjoy kind of letting people know at work that the machine I had at home was more powerful, had better graphics, better sound, and more memory than the machines that I had to use at work. Plus, it had a GUI interface that, Windows, as you know, the early versions of Windows really were bad.
Yes.
Really bad.
Horrible. So, would be my term. Yeah, because was it GEMOS was the name of the one on the ST? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, so that was actually more based on the Mac style, which had kind of like finessed it already, and Windows 1 was, well, as you said, bad. I don't know why.
Yeah, it was really bad.
I'd use stronger terms than that, but we're a family show.
Yeah, it was just a layer on top of DOS, and it was pretty crappy.
Yeah. So how long did you stay with the ST then at home?
I can't remember exactly when. I do remember it was a little sad when the first time that after I sold my ST and I got my first IBM PC clone for home use. It was like a 386SX machine, probably 87, maybe somewhere in that time frame. But by that time, the draw of having a machine that was compatible with what I was using at work was just, too strong, and it was too much not to move away from the ST and get an IBM compatible machine.
Okay. Now, obviously, when we get into your podcast stuff, it's all based on retro computing. So back at this point, were you keeping your old machines? Do you still have your Model 1? You still have your Atari 800, still your ST, or did you get rid of them all and upgrade as you went?
I did. I never really felt like I could afford, at that time to keep the machine and then get the next one. I always used the funds from selling my old machine to getting the new one. I wish I had some of those original machines, but I never kept them.
And have you had to buy them all back since now as part of the retro?
I have. And many times over, so. And luckily, though, I was able to get most of those before, the recent price hikes on some of these machines is just crazy.
Oh, yeah, it's just nuts. CoCo 3 is an example.
Almost as much as they used to cost back in the day.
Or more.
Right.
Literally more. Okay, so I'm not going to cover too much of your more recent stuff as far as, what machines and stuff you had, because it sounds like you went PC like most people did. You're still a software engineer by trade, I presume. That is still your job, your day job?
It's really not anymore.
Oh, okay.
A few years ago, I got out of software development and became, I got into product management. So I've been a product manager for the last 4 or 5 years. I really enjoy that. And I work closely with development teams to get software created and enhanced, but I don't do any development of my own anymore.
It probably really helps so that you've done development, so you understand
the
type of things they're hitting against, rather than just being that product manager they bring out of marketing who has no idea what he's talking about. So
exactly, I think it does. I think it provides a really nice advantage.
Do you like sit over their shoulder? You should change that line of code or anything like that?
No, but it's easy for me to say. When they say, "Well, that's going to take this effort because it's it's hard to do." It's like, well, yeah, wait a minute. I was a developer. I know it's not that hard.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. So when did you start getting into retro then? Like when did the itch start to come back for the older machines?
I would say that was about, and I can't remember exactly, but I kind of judge it based on in relation to when I started the Floppy Days podcast. It was probably about 11 years ago, I would say, that I started thinking about some of the old machines that I had and wondering, if it was still possible to get your hands on those machines, because I had some nostalgia around those. And I got on eBay and started looking around. It's like, oh yeah, all these things are available, and many of them fairly cheaply. And I think the first machine that I bought off of eBay, it was either a Timex Sinclair 1000 or it was a VIC-20. I can't remember which. It was one of those two. But
so your first retro machine you got then was actually not one you had grown up with. It was a totally new one to you.
No, correct. Yeah.
So was your initial nostalgia then just to see what else everybody else was doing back in the day, kind of curious what you'd missed at the time? Or
I think, yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I think, a lot of what I've acquired has been driven by not only what I had, but the reason I've acquired so many different machines is that I always wondered at the time, like when I bought the Atari, what if I had gotten a VIC-20 instead? Or what if I had gotten, a CoCo instead? Or whatever it might have been, or an Amiga instead of an ST. I always wondered what those machines are like. I couldn't afford to own multiple ones at the time, but now I can afford to do that. And so a lot of the stuff I've acquired has been because I wondered what those machines were like, and I had a curiosity around how they worked and what might have been different if I had gone that route instead of the way I went.
And have you also collected the ones you did have back then?
Yes. Yeah, certainly. And those are actually the ones that I keep out around me. I don't know if you can see around me here, but I've got right here behind me, I have a TRS-80 Model 1 with expansion interface and everything.
And dust cover too.
Dust cover.
And
nice.
dust cover. Next to it, I have a TRS-80 Model 100, which isn't something that I actually owned, but my father did back in those early days. And I know I haven't talked about this yet, but that is one machine I programmed on for him because he actually ran his business. He had his own business, and he ran it off the TRS-80 Model 100. And I programmed that in BASIC for him. So obviously I have a lot of nostalgia, and my father's no longer around. So I have multiples of those machines as well. And then I have the 8-bit Ataris and the ST are all out and sitting around me as well.
And so the other machines you've gotten, like the VIC-20s and stuff, is that more for collecting purposes, or is it more like you want to check it out so you can talk about it on a podcast and you kind of like put it away for a while? Or?
Yeah, it's probably the latter. A lot of these machines I've gotten so that I could talk about them at least semi-intelligently on the podcast when we talk about it on Floppy Days. But I also never get rid of them once I get them, or typically
I was just about to ask that because I know some other retro podcasters will get a machine to test for a couple months and figure out everything they need to know to talk about it intelligently, like you said. And then they immediately auction it off to one of their viewers type thing. So you actually keep all these.
I do. It's hard for me to let go of them, I guess, once I have them in my hand. One of the few machines I've done that with is an XD Sorcerer. I actually acquired one of those a couple years ago for a reasonable price, and I had it in my hands for a few months. And it's like, I've got a machine sitting here that's worth, probably close to $1,000. I'm not using it. It's just sitting here getting dust. And I learned enough about it to do the podcast. I don't really need to have it around, and I did go ahead and sell that one. But in general, I tend to keep them even after I talk about them on the podcast.
So obviously my next question is, when does the Randy Kindig Antique Museum open, and when can we go see it?
Yeah, that's almost what this room is right now that I'm in. This is a media room. It's fairly large in our house here. It was set up for projector TV sort of thing, and it's got built-in bookcases and all that. And my wife was kind enough to kind of let me take this as my office and my vintage computer room. So I've got cabinets scattered throughout this room that most of the machines I have been able to put out and kind of have a display here in this room rather than just boxed up in a closet somewhere.
So do you actually have like people that come over and see this stuff, or like is like friends or something?
No,
or maybe
no, not really. Not really. It's more for me, but I am a officer of the Midwest Computer Museum that is just kind of trying to get its feet on the ground. The idea is to have a museum here in the Indianapolis area. And we've got a couple other people that, are involved also as officers, and we're just trying to get that started. So I would say that my efforts along lines actually have exhibits and displays would probably be towards what we do with the museum rather than anything I try to do at home.
Would you be loaning some of your collection to the museum then to show off?
Possibly.
Because it sounds like you have some pretty good ones. And as you mentioned, like the older computers are getting quite expensive. So, if the museum had to buy them all right now, that would get to be quite expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything too exotic, right? I mean, I don't have anything that's, older than an Apple II.
No Apple ones that are worth $500,000 or anything?
No, yeah, boy. I sure wish when I was at college I had known about the Apple I and had gotten in on that. If I could go back in time, that's what I would do, certainly.
Yeah, that'd be an investment.
Yeah. Yes, it would. I'd be retired right now. I know that.
So you got back into retro computing out of nostalgia for things you had not had but had seen back when you were younger, and also just kind of searching what alternative paths you may have taken. What inspired you to actually do a podcast? Because I think the first of the retro computing podcasts you did was Floppy Days, and I think your first episode, if I remember, was February of 2013. So what got you into the whole podcasting side of things versus just the interest in it?
Yeah, you are absolutely correct. Coming up on 9 years next month for Floppy Days, and 9 years for Antic in I think it's
June or something. I think it was a few months later.
May or June. Yeah, I have to look that up again. But it's May or June will be 9 years for Antic as well. But what got me into it was probably around 11 years ago when I was starting to get interested in this stuff, is when I discovered podcasts. And as I was just getting interested in vintage computers at the time, I stumbled across Earl Evans' Retro Bits podcast. And I thought that was just absolutely wonderful. I loved that podcast. At that time, it had already been out for a few years, so I had a lot to catch up on and listen to. And, I always thought Earl did an outstanding job with that. So it wasn't long after that that podcast basically started petering off, and eventually, no more episodes were being produced. And I kind of wanted to continue the same theme that Earl had done, which was take a machine and talk about it in detail and let people know, various aspects of the machine, how it came about, its history, books, magazines, software, hardware, upgrades, all those sorts of things that were available or that are available for the machine. And just decided to kind of continue what Earl had started. And that's how I got started in podcasting. Were you ever in contact with Earl? Like, did you talk to him that you would want to continue the legacy, or did you guys ever meet or even talk on the phone or anything? I don't think I actually ever talked with Earl until after I had already created the podcast. I think I had sent him some emails and let him know how much I enjoyed his podcast at the time, but I never really had any real conversation with Earl to say, hey, I think I want to start a podcast that's, somewhat similar to what you did and kind of extends what you did. But I've had him on Floppy Days now several times since I started the podcast, and now work with him on Next Without 4. And that's how I got started in the podcasting. And then it wasn't long after that I went to it was the first Vintage Computer Festival Southeast, the very first one. I went there. I had just started Floppy Days, and I also thought, there needs to be an Atari 8-bit podcast. And I went to the show, met a lot of people, but I didn't really talk to anybody at the show about it. And then afterwards, I put a call out to the Atari community saying, hey, I'm thinking about starting an Atari 8-bit podcast. Is there any interest out there? And, Kay Savitz and Brad Arnold both stepped up, and both of whom I had met or had seen at the show, and said, yeah, we would be interested in doing that. And that's kind of how Antic got started then as well.
Yeah, that was my next question. So how many podcasts are you involved with now? Because obviously those two are your primary ones that started in 2013, but I believe you do some other ones now too, don't you?
Yeah, really just one other, and that's Next Without 4 with Earl Evans. And we focus on that podcast with either programming retro computers or retro computing languages. Like we had one episode about Fortran, and we had one on Snowball, and we kind of alternate between retro computing languages and then programming retro computers.
So that's the podcast that scratches your software engineering itch, because the other two are hardware based.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is platform agnostic. Like if you go into something like, say, you're talking about Pascal, do you have like 6 episodes on 6 different machines and their implementations? Or I haven't actually heard this one. So
no, I mean, when we talk about a language, we'll typically talk about all aspects of it, like the history of it, and then what it was like then, how the language has progressed over time, and then if you want to program in Pascal today, how can you do that? What compilers or what's available today for C64 or Atari or IBM or whatever platforms to program in those languages.
So is that also, would you consider that also retro podcast where you're going through languages that are part of the retro scene, or do you also cover modern languages like .NET or something like that isn't considered retro?
No, just the retro stuff.
Just retro.
Yeah, it's just focusing on retro stuff. Languages have been around for a long time, or like I said, programming specifically for a particular retro computer. We haven't really done that a lot yet. We did talk about programming like the TI programmable calculator that I mentioned I first programmed on. We had an episode about that, and we'll probably focus on programming for the Commodore 64 and the Atari and so on over time.
And do you actually on the programming side of things versus the history, the language type thing, do you actually have little assignments for people to figure out how to program something in some obscure language if they want to, or do you have listings that are part of the podcast or anything like that as a supplementary material?
No, but that's a good idea. I think that's a good idea. No, we haven't really done that.
So right now it's more the history and what was available then, what's available now.
And what the language is like, right? I mean, Snowball, Pascal, Fortran, they're all totally different. So it's like talking about what the syntax is like and just what the language is like and what purpose, was that language primarily developed for.
Now, are you strictly sticking with high-level languages, or are you also getting into assembly languages for the various chips?
We will also get into assembly language as well. Yeah.
And do you also get into peripheral chips like programming like a Pokey or programming a SID or something like that as well?
We haven't, but there's another good idea. Boy, you're just full of them. I appreciate
He's full of something.
Full of something, yeah.
Hey, I got a real quick question, Randy. I'm going to cut Curtis off for 1 second here. But I want to go back to when you started Floppy Days, because when I started CoCoTALK as a podcast, I don't even know when our podcast version started a few years ago, it was a complete mystery on how to start a podcast. And you did this, almost a decade ago. So, it seems like, well, what is this thing and how do I get into this? So what was the research like on getting that going and starting up an RSS feed and getting it hosted and getting it fed out to because originally it was pretty much only Apple that, had podcasts, and, because it was it was the, what did they call the thing? The iPod was the thing that podcasts were being found on. So it was like, well, how do these people get on this little plastic box, and how do I get on that box? So what was that process like to research that and get it going?
Yeah, it was a lot to learn, that's for sure. I had no idea when I decided to do a podcast how you even produce one, right? So there was a lot to learn. I don't know if I remember a lot of the details around that particular research, but I eventually landed on using Audacity. It was a free tool and very powerful, and really using that a lot in the podcast as well as Skype, in order to, because I typically don't do Floppy Days episodes by myself. I like to have a co-host, somebody who knows more about the machine than I do that we're talking about, or I might be interviewing somebody. That's the other thing I focus on with Floppy Days, is interviewing people who have some significance to finished computers back in the day. So I stumbled upon Skype and started using that, and Libsyn as my host provider. I had to read up, and then I had to spend a lot of time just figuring out, okay, if I create one, how do I get it uploaded to Libsyn in the right format with the right tags and everything to make all this work. But it definitely took a while to get through that process.
Yeah, the early days of podcasts were like the Wild West. A lot of pioneering had to happen to figure stuff out.
It was.
Right? So,
yeah.
I can't
remember if
but
I was gonna say, I can't remember if I pinged Earl or someone like that for help. I might have. I don't remember whether I did at the time.
And I was going to ask, did you ever have any inclination? Like, I know the Apple Podcasts, they were one of the first ones to offer the video podcast, and still one of the only ones that really supports it well. Did you ever have any inclination of doing that? Because obviously some of these machines, some people have never seen before, and it would be kind of cool for you to like hold it up and like, here's all the connector ports and whatever else type of thing. Is that something you've ever thought about doing, or are you strictly?
I have thought about doing that. So like once I retire, maybe I'll start looking at that in more detail. There certainly are some advantages to using a video component to this. The advantage, I think, though, that the audio only has is that it's very easy for someone just to listen to it wherever they are and whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
I know personally, I have difficulty finding time to watch a lot of videos, but listening to an audio podcast is, you can
do while you're driving in the car or whatever.
Yeah, you can be doing other things, and it's pretty easy to do. So whatever I might end up doing, and I might try to do some video component at some point, I don't think I'll ever get away from, having an audio only component of this, because I just think that's just more convenient for people.
Yeah, we do both here, and like something like this, like an interview, obviously is really good on audio type thing. But there are sometimes you're demonstrating a new game and trying to describe it is pretty well impossible. You need the video component. So I do know some people will actually listen to the show, and if they have something we talk about that has a visual component to it, they'll come back and grab the video version, but only watch that little segment of it and skip the rest of the video to listen to. So
did you find kind of finding your voice, did that take time, and how you were going to speak and enunciate, and or were you just always naturally, because you have a really you're very easy to listen to, and like your podcasts are very like NPR-ish, where it's just like it just sounds right. It sounds like you were born to do this. And did that just happen, or did you find this voice over time and this format and this cadence? And
boy, Steve, you're really buttering me up, aren't you? That's
why Steve is the complete opposite. But go ahead.
Yeah.
I've had people tell me that. Other people tell me that I put them to sleep, so I don't know. But because I've had people tell me that I'm easy to listen to, and I don't know why that is. But I did find, though, it did take me a while. I think some of the early shows, if you go back and listen to, I had a little bit of feedback from a few people that sometimes I would get monotonal, and it's easy to put somebody to sleep if you get into a monotone sort of thing. So I really try to focus in the last couple of years, at least, really tried to focus on trying to inject more
inflection, et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's something that I've had to learn and grow with over time. So hopefully people find me easy to listen to.
Yeah, I like the style and the format of the show.
Yeah. And actually, speaking of the style and format of the show, like I went back and listened to your first episode where we were kind of explaining what the podcast Floppy Days was going to be about. And of course, at that time, you had the Happy Days little intro thing, from the old TV show. Now, you've since had a re-recording of it with Floppy Days lyrics, et cetera. So I was wondering, where did that come about? Who sang it? Who wrote it, et cetera?
So that's kind of a funny story. Sorry. Let me take a drink here.
Yeah, go ahead.
You'd think I'd be used to talking for extended period of times. So the way that came about is that I was trying to come up with a good theme song. And again, for I think from the very beginning, I used the Happy Days intro. It was just the music, and hoping that I'd never get sued for doing that, right? Apparently, it's never been popular enough a podcast for them to ever care about it, because no one's ever contacted me about that. But at one point I thought, it would be kind of cool to put some vintage computer lyrics against this. I think that would be pretty cool. And in fact, I think I had gotten an email from, now I forget his first name, Dr. Wyrick, on the Apple side of things. What's his first name? Steve Wyrick. I actually had gotten an email from him saying, hey, have you ever thought about putting lyrics against this? And he is pretty well known in the Apple community for creating special versions of songs, kind of parodies, right, against music that you might be popular, that you're familiar with. And I said, well, no, Steve, I really hadn't thought about that a whole lot. I don't know what it would be. And then he got me thinking, though. And so I started writing some potential lyrics. And I actually sent those to him and said, hey, that was a great idea. Here's some lyrics I was thinking of. And then I actually tried to sing. There's one episode where, like, at the very end of it, I tried to sing, to those lyrics. I probably shouldn't tell you guys because I don't really want you hearing it. But I actually did do that. And then Steve heard that. And he next thing I knew, he sent me what I've been using today. He said, look, I took the lyrics, I changed them a little bit, and I put them to music, and he did all of the song parts to it himself. And I listened and I thought, this is wonderful. This is great.
Yeah, because he's got the harmonies in there and the whole bit. So
and it's all his voice. And I wouldn't even know how to do that. I'm like I said, I'm not musically inclined, so I wouldn't even know how to do it.
Well, we'll check out your singing episode to see if you're lying or not.
Oh, yeah.
Can we post the link in chat to the one where Randy sings?
I'm not even going to tell you which episode it is. So
you'll have to go through all hundreds of them.
Yeah. So that's how that came about. And I asked him, I said, would you mind if I use this in the intro? He said, yeah, that's why I created it. So I've used it ever since. And I get really nice comments about that intro from everybody. I think everybody just loves it. I think the lyrics are really cool. And the way Steve did it just is wonderful.
Have you ever had Steve on the show to talk about that as an episode? That'd be interesting.
Yeah, he helped me do one of the Apple episodes. So when I talked about the Apple computer, and he wrote a history book on the Apple II. So I had him on for the Apple II history episode. And we talked about that a little bit on that show.
Okay, I'll check that one out. That's one I've not listened to. We also got a mention from Mikey in the chat room saying he's heard your version. So, Mikey, give us a review here while we're here.
Mikey, can you give us the episode number, please?
And Tim Gilberts, who's actually one of the Dragon users from England, the UK. Actually,
Wales.
he might be from Wales. Sorry.
Wales.
Only recently said, I only recently started listening to Floppy Days. The lyrics made me smile. Great interview so far, guys. So,
thank you, Tim.
Okay. Well, if the if the lyrics draw people in and then they listen to the rest of the show, that's done its job, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're kind of blessed. We have some pretty good musicians and singers in our group too. So our theme is
our theme music is done by D. Bruce Moore out of Canada, and he's given us a few. And it's great when you have people with talent that give you those gifts, So.
Yeah.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have Samuel Gimes, who does some of our Game On little song parody and stuff here. And I don't know if I'd call that talent or not, but they are funny.
Nails on the chalkboard.
They have been self-described by Samuel Gimes as music-ish.
So you might have some competition for your version of Floppy Days.
So of all the podcasting you've done, what are some of your fondest memories of either episodes or interviews or events that you've done? And I'm sure there's many, but
that's an exact question I had in my list too. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think the episodes that I think I've enjoyed the most, probably the one I did. Well, there were 3 or 4 episodes actually around the Atari 8-bit computer. I really enjoyed that. I got the whole Atari community involved in that. But I got to talk to like the developer of the machine, Joe DeCure, was one of the developers of that 400, 800 computer, and got a lot of sound bites from him and from other people who were involved with either the history, writing a history book or whatever. And I took a little different approach with that episode and made it more like a documentary style, and just really enjoyed that. And I've had a lot of good feedback about that show. But in general, I think the shows I've enjoyed the most have been the ones where I've been able to talk to people who were involved in the development of either of a machine or some aspect of one of the vintage computers. I got to talk to Nolan Bushnell one time, we got to interview him. That was great. Got to talk with John Grant, who developed the operating system for the ZX80. And I got to talk to, a lot of people like that. I'm getting ready to interview one of the guys who developed the X80 Sorcerer.
Wow. And now you have to tell him that you basically flipped it for a profit.
I probably won't tell him that part of it. But, it's actually it's amazing because you'd think it'd be impossible to get a hold of some of these guys.
Yeah.
But sometimes you can. It's easiest to find people on LinkedIn. I've found than anywhere else because they're more likely to be there than they are on Twitter or Facebook. But I'm amazed at how often someone will actually respond to my query for, an interview in those situations. And, because they still have interest in those, and they have a lot of fond memories around the work that they did 30, 40 years ago. And it's amazing to me that it's still possible to talk to a lot of those people.
Right. Do you find it's easier to get them as you've been more established over the years than it was earlier on? Like, who is this Randy, and what is this floppy thing you speak of? Or, has your...
I think some of them actually listened to your show before, too, is another question.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I've ever found one that had listened to it before, but I do send them a link. So when I first contact them, I usually send them a link and say, look, I've interviewed a lot of different people, and here's the here's the link to the podcast if you want to see who else I've talked to, so that they know it's not just a fly by night thing.
Right.
Just some average, I'm an average Joe, but that I'm just nobody reaching out.
Make sure they're not being punked.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I know for us, we're not, in the same level of tenure or anything, but I know now that we've been doing this for a while, the interviews are coming easier and more frequently. I just think we're just more established at this point, whereas before, we might have had a couple of interviews a year. We're now having like an interview almost every other week, and we're booked, weeks and months in advance now, which is a good problem to have. But I think you could just kind of pay your dues a little bit to, get the show level up there and some credibility and other things like that too. I think they certainly help,
Yeah, it definitely does. And if they listen to or watch one or two of the interviews, and they can see that you treat the interviewees right, and that you're, just truly interested in some of the work that they did 34 years ago, that certainly helps. And, they're like someone said, they know they're not going to get punked.
Right.
Yeah, that's the same thing we found too. And you've mentioned like some of your favorite formats of interviews and some of your favorite news, like Nolan Bushnell. Out of all the interviews you've done and all the machines you covered, and maybe this is two separate questions, what is the most surprising thing you found out that you did not expect? Like this question, apparently.
Yeah, I like this question. Well, I wasn't prepared for that question, that's for sure.
Like, is there some secret that's been revealed that you had no idea about some machine or some person?
Yeah, that's one of the things I typically like to spring on some of the people that I interview, right? Like, do you have any funny stories of things that happened, while you were working on this computer, or, doing whatever work that you were doing? Maybe it was software, hardware, whatever it was. I typically like to ask that question: were there any funny stories? But as far as any real surprises that I've had, I guess the biggest surprise maybe that I've had is the fact that so many of the people who did do this work 40 years ago are so interested in still talking about those things. And in many cases, they are surprised. I think some of that has been surprising for me, is in that the people that I talk to are surprised that anyone cares what they did 40 years ago. I mean, why does anyone care that I did work on, a Atari or an Apple or CoCo or whatever 40 years ago? And they're surprised to find that anyone has an interest in that in many cases.
I know one surprise I've had, and it does not happen often, thankfully, but there's been a few cases where somebody got burned back in the day. They either got, they didn't get paid the royalties or whatever else. And they actually do not want to come on and talk about it because they kind of had a bad taste in their mouth left from that. And they've kind of left it behind and they don't want to ever see it again type thing. So there's been one or two people that have actually asked for interviews and refused because they said, oh, that was a bad time in my life. I don't want to revisit. Have you ever encountered that?
Yeah, from a couple people. I remember I tried to contact somebody on the TI-99 side of things who, I forget his name now, but he was like the product manager at the time for the TI-99. I really wanted to talk with him, and he said, that was a bad time. I don't want to talk, I simply don't want to talk about it. And I have had people who I wanted to interview tell me there might be specific questions. I often try to send questions ahead, and there might be specific questions they don't want me to ask because maybe there is some, something raw there or something that they don't want to talk about. So,
yeah, or it has to get personal between other people, and then you start getting shenanigans.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there are other people that don't care. They'll answer any question you ask.
I think
this other guy was a real jerk.
Yeah, I think we had asked you, right. And I think we had asked you that question. Is there anything you don't want to talk about? Because we try to ask people that in advance. Yeah, so just to be respectful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on our interviews, it's always okay to say, I would rather not talk about that. We'll just leave it at that. So,
yeah. And I will say, in the 11 years I've been in the vintage computer community, it's been great. So I don't hold any grudges. Not everything's always gone wonderful, but I don't hold grudges. And in general, though, I've been treated very, very well and really appreciate that. I've had a lot of really positive emails and, Facebook posts and Twitter contacts and things like that. And I appreciate every single one of those I get.
That's cool. Similar question to Curtis then, when it talked, because you collect and report on computers maybe you didn't own. Some of those computers you had no previous experience with. Did you ever find some that either were maybe overhyped and were underperforming based on how they were marketed, or the opposite, where they were kind of an under the radar thing that actually surprised you that they were a more powerful machine than you would have expected?
I would say that's one of those things that I'm not sure I want to mention specifics because I want to.
Oh, you don't want to
say any particular vintage.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so how about one that surprised you that was better than you thought it would be, or is even
better
that too
than
loaded?
I thought it would be.
Yeah.
I will say, one of the things a couple of years ago I decided to do was to get into some of the non-US computers.
Mm-hmm.
So I started acquiring a BBC Micro and a ZX Spectrum. And, so I said ZX. I've already been assimilated, I think, by the British.
I'm Canadian. We're used to it already. So
okay. the CPC and some of those machines. And I really knew almost nothing about the machines that were not here in the US. But when I got into the BBC Micro and I started really learning more about that and preparing to do a show, and it's like, this is amazing. This was like the Apple II of Great Britain. And I didn't know that before I really started digging in and learning more about it, just how powerful and how influential some of those machines were that did not originally come from the US.
And do you have a favorite retro machine? Now, it might be nostalgia based, like maybe the Atari 800 is your favorite, just due to nostalgia purposes, or do you have a favorite that's changed because of all the different interviews and machines you've gone through?
If you put a gun to my head and said that, let's say I had to move into a tiny house, and I've thought about this before, right? What machines would I keep? Because I couldn't keep them all. An Atari 800 would definitely have to be in that mix. Probably be the first thing I'd made sure that I have. There's just so much I still love about that machine, and the fond memories I have of that machine. It's probably my favorite machine of all time.
Okay. Now, I went on your Twitter account. I noticed that you were kind of teasing like some of the machines you're planning on covering in 2022 here. And you were asking for, some suggestions for co-hosts on some machines. And I noticed one of the machines you had there was the Dragon 32, one of the UK machines. Yep. And I was going to suggest, we've had him on the show too, is Duncan Smead, because he was actually one of the people that programmed the ROMs for it. And he's a pretty good interviewee when we've had him. So I would suggest that. And I don't know if 6C, who's in the chat right now, is in direct contact with Duncan these days still, but if he is, maybe forward that contact information to you.
Well, that would be wonderful. I put that out there, the call for co-hosts, a while ago, and I've had a lot of likes, but no one stepped up to offer or volunteer to co-host for that episode or for the ZX Spectrum, either one. So I might contact you later to get more information about who that is and how I can get in contact with them. But yeah. I appreciate that.
Yeah, we've had him on a couple of times. I think, Stevie, we had a separate interview with him once. And then I think, was he on the Dragon special?
He came on for our 3rd anniversary very unexpectedly. And then we threw together a Dragon special where we got together all the people from the Dragon community to talk about the past and present of that machine. And he was part of that panel. And the fact that he, the interesting stories like, having to fly to Seattle for a day to go to Microsoft to close a deal and meet Bill Gates, and then get offered the job to work for Microsoft and say, no, you guys look like you're working in a rat hole here. I got to get back to the UK and leaving and stuff. So yeah, some really interesting stories about some experiences that a lot of people would never have had. But to
sounds like a great one.
Yeah, to be able to look at the Microsoft facility and say, man, you guys look like you're working in a, in a boiler room. I don't want to work here.
Yeah, I would definitely highly recommend him. So 6C, I think, is still in contact with him fairly regularly.
Who we're calling 6C is Ciaran Anscomb, and he's the creator of the Dragon emulator called Xroar too. So if anybody knows the Dragon well, Ciaran would be a good person to speak to.
I think one thing I need to do a better job of is probably just jumping on some of the individual forums and, posting that same call for co-host, because I think all I've done so far is post that on Facebook and maybe Twitter. And I think if I go to individual forums, I'm more likely. That's how I found, some of the other co-hosts for like some of the British machines.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I mean, your podcast is so general on covering all these variety of machines, so that the hardcore people probably just catch your episode only when you mention their machine, which is too late to get them on as a co-host. So
that's probably true.
Have you checked out any of the Japanese machines too? It sounds like you're getting into the European ones, but the Japanese markets had some really interesting platforms too. MSX being one of them, and a bunch about PC Engine and
the Fujitsu FM777s.
Yeah, MSX certainly is on the list to cover, and I want to get an MSX machine. There aren't many machines at this point that I'm really looking to acquire, but MSX or an MSX2 machine is certainly one of those I'd like to get and learn more about prior to talking about on the show. But beyond that, I guess I'm not that aware of what other machines Japan came out with.
Yeah, well, there's a lot. So,
it's like the UK.
Yeah.
I got a question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah. Ron Delvo has a question. Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah. The term trash 80 comes up. And then I was thinking, do you have to deal with different people's egos about different machines and, one's better than the other type of thing? Do you want to talk about that a minute?
Not often, at least not because we don't really broach that topic on Floppy Days. We will talk about, for the machine that we're talking about, and again, I always have a co-host who knows more about it than I do. But what were the advantages of that machine? What were the disadvantages? Why did it not make it? That sort of thing. But we typically, even on Antic, and I know Kay likes to drop bombs once in a while about the C64 not being as good as the Atari or something like that. But in general, try to stay away from a lot of that sort of that sort of discussion.
It's funny. It's still happening now with game systems like the PlayStation is better than this, or my dad can beat up your dad, and all these kind of things. So it's just interesting that those levels of loyalty and rivalries haven't gone away. Hopefully, those of us of the mature age can look back and say, yeah, look, when we were kids, we wanted to defend our computer of choice, but now that we're older, we can embrace and appreciate all these nostalgic machines of that era. So hopefully us older folk have wizened and matured enough to look at things on an even keel, but there's still a lot of modern kind of fanboyism on various things going on. So
definitely.
I was just going to say, Stevie, I think it's actually just shifted. I think modern ones are still the Mac versus Linux versus Windows thing is still pretty vivid. But in the nostalgia, the retro computing hobby, I think it's retro versus modern. That's about the only real rivalry because it's all the retro machines kind of going. This is back when people actually knew the machine inside and out, could program every little aspect. Nowadays, you have no idea what this library is doing or anything else. So there's a little bit of a combative nature between retro versus modern. But I think all the retro community as a whole generally don't go after each other's throats like they used to in the old days, like Atari versus Commodore versus Tandy versus whatever, Apple, whatever.
Right.
There's still some of that. You'll see arguments, happen, but particularly like between the Atari 8-bit and the Commodore 64, I think there's still strong rivalry there, and maybe the Amiga and the ST. So there are pockets of that, but probably, like you said, probably less than before. I know back in the day when I had my Atari, it's like I thought the Commodore was not the greatest machine in the world, because I was an Atari loyalist. Yeah. But today I can look at it more objectively, and I think both machines certainly have their merits.
Yeah, it's interesting to know that we were fortunate enough to live in a time when there were so many platforms that coexisted. And I think a particular job I had around 1989, I was working for a place called the Byte Shop. And in that store, we were selling Apple II. We were selling Apple IIc. We were selling Mac Classic, Mac IIs. I was selling an x86, a 286, and a 386. All these machines lived at the same time, and you could walk into a computer store and buy any one of a variety of different machines, and none of them were the wrong choice at that time. There wasn't a clearly defined standard or clearly superior or perfect solution for all needs. And so, but those days are gone now. Now, like kind of what Curtis is saying, you're basically a PC or a Mac person.
It's homogenized.
But there was a time in history where all these machines existed and people were buying different machines based on things, either by brand recognition or I'm savvy enough to know that this chip can allow me to do something that chip can't do. But there was so much diversity and choice at one point in time, and that's just not here anymore,
And that's what I loved about it, and that's why I started Floppy Days. What's been hard for me is right now, because I'm at that point in the computer timeline where it's time to talk about the IBM PC. right? And that's hard for me because to me, that's when the standards started coming in.
The beginning of
we
the
lost
end.
the diversity.
And the Wild West was gone at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And I understand the advantages of standardization, believe me, but I still loved it when we had all these different platforms that were incompatible.
Yeah. Where everybody was innovating in totally different ways from each other just to figure out what would work. A lot of failures doing it, obviously, but that was the fun part of it because you never knew what was coming next. Now it's, you get an upgrade to whatever.
Yeah.
There's nothing brand new.
And I enjoyed visiting a friend who had a different computer just to see what was their setup like and what did software look on their machine that was different than on my machine. Things like that. It was neat that nowadays you're looking at somebody's game system or their computer system. It's a different shade of something you already know or own or have seen. But there were so many unique nuances to seeing different machines and how the people use them and why they use them and how, even like the Sierra Online games that I love, they look different on the Amiga than they did on the PC because the Amiga had a wider color palette, and things like that. So it was just neat to see this nuance and subtlety that's lost,
I got something else for you, Randy.
Ron Delvaux, go ahead.
Hey, the internet seems to bring them all together because they could all communicate through the serial ports and so on. And were you ever involved with CompuServe or Delphi or, back in the day?
Not much. I can remember accessing CompuServe a little bit for work. I remember, of course, AOL and using that a little bit. And I certainly frequented local BBSs a lot, particularly with the Atari 8-bit. But
have you done any BBSing lately?
Not lately. No, even though I have the hardware now, I could do that again, right? Because I've got the FujiNet for my Atari and my CoCo Atom now, and it's being developed for other platforms as well. And I know most of the platforms have some sort of networking capability, or modern hardware for those to access the internet. But no, I haven't done much of that. Just haven't found time to.
But you enjoy it, wouldn't you, if you got around to it at some point in the future?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would like to do that. Maybe after I retire. I keep saying that, don't
I? Right. So are you familiar with the Thomas Cherry Holmes project that has that, I forgot what it was called right now?
FujiNet. That's FujiNet.
Is that what it is?
No.
Yeah.
Well, there's a platform that all systems can get on right now.
That's Plato.
Plato term, yeah.
Oh, Plato term, yeah.
Yeah, you familiar with that too?
Yeah, I am familiar with that. But are you guys familiar with FujiNet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
That was our Apple guy saying yes. I don't know that all of us are, but yeah.
Do you want to talk about it a little bit? What do you know about it?
Well, it's basically it's an attempt to get all of the vintage computers connected to the internet, right? So the FujiNet was originally developed for the Atari. That's why it's called FujiNet. And it connects to the serial port on the Atari, has virtual disk. You can, have virtual disks sitting out on the internet and access those from your machine as if they were a real disk drive, that sort of thing. And it's looking to provide that sort of capability for all the different platforms. It was developed for the CoCo Atom now. There's like a beta version of that, which I have a copy of, or which I have on here. It's being developed for the Apple, and the intent is to get that on all the platforms so that basically they can all talk to each other and they all have the same sort of capability when it comes to virtual disks.
And it's all free.
You got to buy there.
You have to buy the hardware.
It's hardware. It's hardware based. So, but it's it's like $60-$70. It's pretty inexpensive.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let's look into that.
Yeah, we've got a couple of network cards being developed right now in the CoCo community. So I don't know if they're going to start working on doing protocols compatible with that or not, but I'm hoping so.
Is there anything you can tease that I know you've tweeted a few things, but you got any spoilers that you want to let people watching us now know that might be coming up on a future episode of one of your podcasts?
Just a couple of interviews. I haven't talked about those or haven't teased those anywhere. I've got a couple interviews coming up. I mentioned I've got an interview coming up with Hal Ivey, who is the developer of the ASCII Sorcerer, and also one with Monty Davidoff, who developed the floating point routines for Microsoft's very first BASIC.
Wow.
And so I'm excited to be able to talk with those people.
And also just to follow up on your next Without For podcast, which I did not even know about before this show. Do you have any interesting interviews coming up there with maybe some of the people that develop languages, et cetera?
So we've got an interview coming up with someone who actually sells Commodore 64 software training today. And,
wow.
Yeah, I know. Interesting, huh?
I didn't expect that.
Yeah, we'll be talking with him, and our next podcast actually is probably going to be about programming competitions. So I guess I'd like to find out more from you guys if possible. Do you guys have any sort of programming competition on the CoCo side, like an annual competition of some sort for software development?
We've had multiple CoCo or MC10 entries in some of the like 10-liner basic contests, but those are multi-platform. I'm trying to think if we have any specific CoCo ones. We've had a few in the past. Was it Diego that did the one? I'm trying to remember. Do you remember, Stevie?
I think there was one for CoCo Fest where if you submitted something to be judged for CoCo Fest, you would win like a trophy. So there's been a few that were kind of just community driven. The bigger ones are things like Retro Challenge, which you're probably familiar with. And then they have these a few times a year, these 10-liner contests where you write a program that fits in 10 lines of basic code for any system. What's the one that we were talking about recently in the news, Curtis, where the guys didn't even know what a CoCo was, where they had this contest where you could, and the guy from ID Software is one of the judges. Do you remember what that was
John
called?
Romero? Yeah.
The Amigo,
it's out of Russia.
The Amigos Retro Gaming guys told us about this one, but there's a modern contest now with some pretty big cash prizes to develop a modern retro game. Aren't too many rules on what language it can be in or whatever else, but there's some big judges and a few things like that. I can't remember the name of that competition, but that's a new one.
Yeah, because the first prize is like in the thousands of dollars. So.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So there's really nothing, there's no like an annuals contest specific to the CoCo that's
not
that you
really.
guys have in the community.
Yeah, CoCo Fest kind of did for a bit there, but I mean, with COVID and stuff, that's kind of.
Yeah, and as Erica was pointing out, Erica had found a program from a listing where it was originally done on I think maybe a PET, where it was 1K of a Space Invader type game where there was just one invader. It was written in BASIC and it fit into 1K. And so on the CoCo Facebook page, people have been having a lot of fun with that, writing different CoCo versions and modern versions of that original 1K program listing. So this guy, Erico Monterio, has kind of been heading that up on our CoCo Facebook group. And it's been interesting to see how that goes.
But nothing really formal the last couple of years now.
Yeah.
Now, Randy, how much do you know about the color computer and how much the new stuff that we've been generating, like the Gimme X and the SDC and all about that?
Good question. So I did a series of shows on the CoCo probably 2 or 3 years ago, right? So typically when I talk about a particular platform on there, I really tend to get up to speed at that point, but it's so hard for me to keep up with what's going on in all the different communities with all the different machines. So while I do follow a lot of CoCo people on Facebook and Twitter and so on, I can't say that I'm up with everything that's going on. I do keep an eye on that stuff because I like to buy the modern upgrades. So, I've got a CoCo SDC and I've got, as many of the modern upgrades as I can get or that I come across that sound interesting. So I do try to keep up in that regard, but it's hard for me to keep up in all the different communities.
Which actually brings me up to a follow-up question to that. So if you do a couple episodes on a specific machine, say 4, 5, 6 years ago on Floppy Days, do you ever do follow-up episodes where you kind of go like, here's what's happened in the community since, like some new hardware? Or is that something you've ever done?
I've never done that. I'm having a hard time even getting through all the different machines that I need to get to, right? So I've just now gotten to 1982, just getting ready to start 1982 in terms of compute. And there were a lot of computers that came out in 1982. So
before the crash.
Yeah, actually following up on stuff, other than I might do an interview later with, like, I talked about the Sorcerer a long time ago, but now I'm going to do an interview with the guy who developed it because I was able to now. That's really the only sort of follow-up you might ever see, I guess, from in that regard. I
guess you just need to make it another podcast to do the. No, I'm just kidding.
Curtis, is this podcast feature creep now you're trying to do?
I think I'm involved in enough podcasts right now.
Yeah. I think it's a good problem to have, that there are so many new things that keep getting developed for our vintage systems. That it even though a lot of us here on this show are really focused just on the CoCo, I have a hard time myself just keeping up with everything that's happening on the CoCo hardware and software wise. And when you're dealing with hundreds and thousands of machines, it's really hard to do.
Have you ever followed Tandy?
Yeah, I mean, I see the tweets and on that, but I can't say I followed it that closely.
It's gained a lot of traction in the past few years, where the people on YouTube will spend the whole month doing videos on specific Tandy systems, and Curtis found a lot of those that we started featuring in the news on our show, and a lot of those folks have kind of joined the CoCo community and are working on some really interesting projects and things like that.
Oh,
so
nice.
Yeah.
We have a question. I think you kind of answered it earlier, but Mark Siegel, who used to be one of the upper guys at Tandy, actually, is asking, is that a Model 100 behind you? And I believe you already said that you do have a Model 100 behind it.
Yeah, with the expansion unit.
Yeah. Yes, I have the expansion unit. I also have the version of that same expansion unit that's about that big.
The modern one.
It's called the MVT. I think it's called the MVT 100. So that you can hook your Model 100 up to a VGA display. And I've got a floppy drive for it. I've got all stuff that I never had, back in the day for the Model 100. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the one you said, you mentioned that your dad actually ran his business off the Model 100 back in the day.
Right.
So he went far. That's an
in-joke.
Yeah, it's an in-joke. The commercial for the Model 100 with Fletcher, and her boss was like, "You'll go far, Fletcher." What was I going to say about that? I completely lost my train of thought.
That went over my head.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay.
I was going to ask on your dad with the Model 100, like you have the expansion. Did your dad have the expansion box too, and he used it as an actual computer that on his desk, or did he use it as a portable computer most of the time?
He used it as a portable computer. His job was actually climbing poles and working on the circuit breakers on the poles for the utility companies. And so he was always traveling a lot, and so the Model 100 was perfect for him to. So basically, I wrote a program to put all of his inventory in the Model 100, and it would generate the invoices for him.
Cool. Did he use the modem functionality? Because I know a lot of the people that use the Model 100s for reporters, they would get their stories typed in on the road somewhere, and they'd send them up to 300 baud later. So did he do that kind of stuff too, or is he strictly for?
No, it was all done right there on the machine.
I remember my question now.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, we were talking about the Model 100. Didn't you, when you're at Tandy Assembly, have an exhibit where you were showing off a lot of different like portable computers that were Tandy based, like pocket computers and portables
I did.
and stuff? Yeah,
I did. Yeah, I've got most of the pocket PCs. I think maybe one model I don't have of the Radio Shack Pocket PC.
And Mark Siegel's asking, did you ever use the barcode reader for the Model 100?
That's one thing I don't have and I've never used. No.
Was your dad considered advanced at the time, doing what he was doing, and you helping him?
Probably not, because, at the time, maybe early on, but he stuck with the Model 100 line. He went to 200, and even one of the later models, like a 600 maybe, which, wasn't even the same thing at all as the 100, 200.
Yeah, that was an MS-DOS one, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was MS-DOS, yeah. So he stuck with the Radio Shack, but, they were always machines. I think when he had them and was using them, they were actually hard to acquire even at that time, because they were behind where things were at.
Yeah, it still has one of the best keyboards I've ever used, especially for portable. It was an amazing machine at the time.
Yeah.
And the battery life.
It's got really nice BASIC on it too.
Yeah, the battery life was phenomenal. I mean, was with double A's or triple A's? I can't remember now. I think double A's.
Right,
yeah, I love programming it because the BASIC was just wonderful.
And it was built in mini apps too, like the telecom program and a editor and stuff too. So it's like instant on.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was the 1983 version of the iPad, I guess, really, with a real keyboard.
Yeah, a lot of journalists had used it because they could do stuff from the road, and then just hook up to a payphone and upload their stuff.
Curtis is working on an OS 9 version.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal machine. So
I think
your podcasts, are you kind of getting them under a regular schedule now? Because I was taking a look at some of the dates of the early ones, especially, and you'd have like bigger gaps, smaller gaps. Is it just dependent on the content you have available to you, or are you trying to get it all scheduled now?
I'm trying to get back on a monthly schedule. I was on one episode per month schedule for a long time, and then real life kind of got in the way, and I got off schedule there for a while. But I'm trying to get back to a monthly schedule now throughout the rest of this year.
And is that for all three of your podcasts? You're trying to get to that, or?
Yeah, we do one per month for Antic. Next, without four, we're looking to do once every other month. So we expect to have one in February, and then every other month.
Okay. Any further questions from the panel?
What's the red thing back there? Is it like the bat phone or something? It's next to your...
Is the red thing in front of the basketball behind him?
Yeah, what is that?
There's something red.
That is it's in the shape of a bird, but that is you heat it up and it introduces pleasant smells in the room.
Oh,
okay. Unlike the panel here, when we get heated up, we release unpleasant smells in the room. What about the audience? Anybody in the live audience have questions for Randy? This is unique.
You can probably see behind me here. You can see. So you see the bookshelf in the back.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And about 90% of that is computer books. At least 90%.
Right.
Now, are those like manuals or generalized computer books?
Both.
It's something you don't get anymore. We don't get much paper in modern computers anymore.
Yeah. Do you have a pride in that collection that you're really glad you have in your book collection?
Boy, it'd be hard to. There must be it seems like 1,000 different books in there. There's probably not that many, but it'd be hard to pick out the ones that I'm most proud of, I guess. I've got a pretty good collection for most of the platforms, though. I have a strong interest in vintage books, the books about the vintage computers, and I have acquired a lot of them over the years.
And actually, that brings up another question. I mean, you're doing the podcast going through the history of programming languages, the history of different computers, the history of Atari. Have you ever had the inclination of actually kind of summarizing some of that and actually publishing a book yourself?
I have thought about that very strongly. I proposed that a while back, really more of in the form of, but it would follow along the same context as the show, is so somebody like me who likes to or owns maybe 30 or 40 different machines, each one being different. And when I pull one out, I have no idea. A lot of times I don't remember how do I even start this thing? How do I use this? I don't even know how to use this. So I thought about doing a book that would really, like for each platform, have the basic information about how to use that machine.
I'd buy that.
Yeah, would you?
Something like retro computing for dummies.
Yeah.
We did have one question from the viewers. From James Jones is asking, did you ever use Focal, F-O-C-A-L, on the PDP-8 back in the day?
No. Nope. The only thing we did was assembly language.
Okay. And we have another comment from Mikey saying the manual idea is a great idea. There you go.
I have people tell me that. I think that's another, I'm going to use the phrase, when I retire.
When I retire.
Make that happen.
That's your catch-all.
I'm going to be busy. I'm going to be busy when I retire.
When I get around to it, right?
So the next question is, when are you retiring so you can get all of these projects done?
Right. Come on, get with it.
With all that podcast money you're making, that should be
right. Right. Surprisingly, it may not be that long. I'm working towards making that happen. So I'm hoping it won't be too long.
And also, you were mentioning you guys are kind of working as a kind of a committee to get that computer museum going. Do you have a kind of dates tentatively set, or is it still in the planning stages?
It's still in the planning stages. There's still a lot we have to figure out. We don't even have, any sort of location for it yet. Do have a lot of hardware, but we do take donations. We just had an IBM PC 5150 donated to the museum in its original box.
Wow.
And so we've gotten a lot of donations. We have a lot of hardware to show. We just don't have anywhere to show right now.
I guess you kind of have to wait for COVID to be over for that to be viable anyway. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
Mark Siegel had a question for Randy.
About what
ahead,
didn't
Mark. What
you like about the Atari 800? Assuming there was something. Yeah. He wants to know, was there anything you didn't like about the Atari 800?
80 columns.
The lack of?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I would have loved to have had 80 columns. That's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah. I remember stumbling on the ability to print like giant fonts, like in multicolors. It was kind of a pseudo graphics mode where you could print giant, like big fonts in like 16 different colors on the screen. I don't know what that mode was called, but I remember stumbling because we had Ataris in school and stuff too. So I remember being able to hack around with it. And I was able to figure out how to get big print on the screen and cycle through the colors with palette animations and stuff like that. So there were some cool features that you could do that we couldn't do on the CoCo just because of the lack of hardware,
We had a word pack that you could add to the computer to give you 80 columns.
Yeah. Were there add-on cards back in the day that would give you that stuff?
There was actually something that you could attach to the joystick port. And this was marketed by Atari that gives you 80 columns, but that came out much later than the Atari 800. And then of course today there's some modern upgrades that will allow you to do it. But back when I had it, when I was trying to use it for school, for instance, I would have loved to have had 80 columns.
Okay. And if you don't want to answer this because you might offend anybody in the community or a particular system, but do you have any thoughts on modern upgrades on vintage systems that are using new technology like FPGAs or enhanced audio or video processors to do things to add to an old system that they weren't able to do in the past?
I guess, I love modern upgrades. That's always been a fascination of mine. I don't mind at all making my Atari or any of the computers I have do things that they couldn't do back in the day or do them much better than they could. I'm not really a fan of the old floppy drives, cassette drives, printers, modems, any of that stuff. Like I don't care about, I really don't care. And if I've got modern upgrades that prevent me from having to use those, then that's great.
Okay.
The machine itself is what I care about the most.
So is your computer filled with emulators too?
I do have emulators on my Mac here for, a lot of the different machines. But, some of the things like FPGAs that emulate a machine, I don't really I guess I'm not that big a fan of those. It's like if I'm going to emulate the machine, I might as well just run an emulator on my Macintosh. Why?
Yeah,
I'd rather either have the real hardware.
I'm kind of the same mindset, because for me, back in the day, we were always trying to push the hardware. You'd be trying to add 80 column cards and RAM beyond the regular expansion and graphics enhancements and all kinds of stuff, because that's what everybody was trying to do, is drive their computers to be better. The problem back then was the cost. The technology may not have existed yet. So the fact that it's caught up now, we can do it now. I don't have a problem with that either. I'm not strictly retro. I have to, like you said, I have to run my 1500 baud cassette because that's what I had in 81.
Right. Yeah, we've got something called the CoCo SDC, where it's a floppy emulator cartridge that you run disk images off an SD card. And I think anybody who's used that would agree that that's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I could not conceive using a CoCo nowadays without that. You know? So the first thing I acquire for every platform that I've ever gotten is a virtual disk and the best graphics capability. So like if there's an RGB port on it, finding a way to use that RGB port for graphics. So those are things I always, so almost every machine I have has those sort of modern upgrades on it. Gotcha. We do have another question from the live chat from David Kraker. And I think since you've mentioned that you're only up to around 1982, that might already answer the question. But he wants to know if you have any podcasts covering the classic Mac. Not yet. When we hit 84, I definitely will be talking about the Mac. But yeah, I try to cover in order when the machine's released, pretty much.
Yeah, because your first episode, I believe, was the Altera, wasn't it?
You just got muted somehow, Randy. I'm not sure how on Zoom.
Okay, somebody muted me. Somebody didn't want to listen to me after all. I don't know. Yeah, the Altair was the first one, and I said the most current one's the IBM PC, which came out in late '81.
Okay. Yeah, and right now you're hitting like the golden age, like from 80 through 83, I think, is when everything was exploding. There's tons of different machines.
There are.
And then starting in 84, 85, it started to amalgamate and homogenize into the basic platforms.
Yeah.
Well, it's something to look forward to. So
I've got a lot more to cover. I've got 10 years worth of machines to cover yet, I think.
And you're doing one show a month, so you should be done about 2152 AD or something.
Well, and occasionally there'll be an interview in there as well. So it's not like every month I'm covering a computer. Plus, some of the computers, like the CoCo, I did 3 shows on. The Apple, I did 3 shows on. The Atari, I did 3 shows on. So it's not like I'm covering like a different computer every month either.
So do you plan, like, obviously you've got a ton of stuff to cover, which you probably can't even do in your lifetime. Do you plan when you retire to maybe increase the frequency, or do you plan on maybe passing the baton on to somebody else to carry on at some point? Because if you're going to try to cover every computer made, and of course, retro is a sliding scale as to where it is, as the future comes, retro becomes more and more recent. So do you have a long-term plan for that?
Yeah, I'm only interested in covering the stuff that came out in the late 70s through the mid to late 80s. And that's it. I don't ever plan to go beyond that.
Oh, okay. Because you do have a finite goal. Okay.
Yeah. Because once you get there, everything's IBM PC or Mac, right? So.
Yeah. And then it just becomes the same old thing, just iterated differently every year type thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it will win as long as I make it that long. It will end one day.
Well, it's do you have children?
I do.
Are any of them interested in vintage computing?
Not particularly.
Okay. Because it's interesting how you picked up somebody else's mantle when they were kind of, retiring. So maybe somebody else will want to pick up the Floppy Days mantle when you retire from doing that particular podcast too.
Perhaps. I plan to see it through, though.
Yeah. Well, look, when you're done, though, when you say, look, 1989, here's the cutoff or whatever it is, I'm done. At that point, when you're done, maybe somebody else will carry it forward.
And once you do complete this massive project of covering the entire history of home and microcomputing from 74 through the mid to late 80s, as you're saying, Do you have any plans of maybe submitting that to something like the Smithsonian or something, so that's a permanent record that people can visit and hear decades down the road?
I hadn't thought about anything like that, other than I know Kay has done a great job of trying to get like all of his Atari Antic interviews up on archive.org, which we're assuming is going to be around for a long, long time. So I might try to do something like that with all the episodes, but I can't imagine Smithsonian or anything like that being interested in my little podcast.
It's a form of preservation, and so it's good sometimes to get hold of these people while they're still with us, because unfortunately we're all mortal and our time here is finite. So when you can capture some of these things while the people are still around to recount the stories and this information, that is priceless for future generations too. The historical value of that interview and that information.
You are absolutely right. And the more time passes, the more difficult it is to get in contact with some of these people.
Yeah, I think there was a guy who we wanted to interview who he was basically saying, like, I really don't remember. He's like, I'm old and I've forgotten. I think we were, sending emails back and forth, but the person's recollection just wasn't there already. So yeah, I mean, it can definitely happen. We've had somebody we interviewed that sadly about a year later passed after we interviewed them. So, it's bittersweet, but it's also great that we were able to capture that information and that story with that person, so.
Yeah. Right. And, my dream interview, I'd say one of my bucket list things is to get an interview with Steve Wozniak.
Oh, wow. That would be great to get the Woz.
I'm hoping for an opportunity because he's going to be at the museum in Montana next year or this year. And I'm hoping to get an opportunity to actually meet him there. He's going to be getting an award at the museum, and
wow.
I'm hoping that I can meet him.
I think I don't know him, but just what I see of him publicly, I think he would be receptive to the idea. He's done a lot of things. Like he's been on the Big Bang Theory. He did Dancing with the Stars. I think he's got a sense of wanting to interact with the public in a way. So
yeah, the problem is he's such a nice guy, though. But there are people around him. He's got people around him who protect him because, otherwise he'd
get pulled into everything.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a guy who can't say no. He's very friendly, very affable. So.
Okay. Yeah. But I mean, your show definitely is credible enough to where he would see the value of doing it too. If you were able to get through that wall of protection, so.
Yeah. I hope so. I hope so.
Not that it'll help in the slightest, but we'll pull for you and
If you have any pull there, I appreciate it.
Yeah,
we don't.
We'll get the prayer warriors working on that. So yeah, that's awesome.
You wouldn't want to talk to Bill Gates?
Bill Gates?
Well, yeah. I would love to talk to Bill Gates, but I figure he's harder to get hold of than
Wozniak.
Than Woz. It's funny because I did interview, and I forget their name now, somebody who did a computer history book, and they said that they knew Bill really well, and I suggested, hey, let's do a podcast with Bill sometime, and they said, yeah, let's do that. And then afterwards I said, hey, can we do that? And then I get crickets, right? I don't know.
Do you find any even mild amount of people like running into you at a vintage event somewhere and like a little bit starstruck by seeing you?
That happens occasionally. It's almost funny though, because it's like I'm nobody, but it's interesting just because I have a podcast and people listen to it. That it makes my wife laugh sometimes when that happens at a show or something.
Yeah,
or somebody comes up and says, "Oh, I listen to all your podcasts," and I think it's great. And I'd say usually that's as far as it goes.
Right.
I always appreciate that. But once in a while, you can tell that they're a little bit intimidated or whatever. And it's like, man, there's no reason to be intimidated with me.
That's cool. I don't know if we're taking up too much. Do you have more questions, Chris? We're not trying to get rid of you, but I'm also just trying to respect your time.
I think my wife's going to be coming through the door here any minute. So
okay. Well, Ron
I went through all the questions I had. So
yeah. So maybe we'll just do a last call for questions from the panel and the audience for Randy Kindig before we let his wife have him back.
And a big thank you for coming on too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This has been an honor to have you. You're very well respected, and so thanks for spending some time with us.
And you just added some respectability to our show finally. So that really helps too.
There you go. No, I really appreciate coming on here. This is great. This is a great format. I need to join in and listen or watch and maybe try to join in once in a while.
Hey, anytime you want to come on the panel and just discuss today's stories, feel free to pop by.
And if there's anything you want
in the CoCo community,
if you want to just plug something coming up too, feel free to use this as a sounding board to do that.
Great.
Like when you get to your Dragon special, that might be something you can come on to promote and talk about, for example. That's related.
Right.
We cover Dragon.
Perfect.
Curtis, you still have a list of email addresses on people you were wrangling for our Dragon interview. Maybe you can forward Randy's contact information to some of them so he can possibly, arrange some.
Yeah, I'll try to get you hooked up with Duncan. I saw Sixy earlier mention that he's not in regular contact with Duncan at this moment. Maybe it's Stuart Orchard. I'm thinking that was because somebody was talking to him fairly regularly. But I'll get him hooked up with you.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Better write that down before I forget.
So, and there's a bumper you recorded for me a long time ago. I don't know if Mark Bosley can play it before we play you out to the commercial. I'm not sure which one it was on, but the bumper, and that's what I think when we were talking about the VCF, the bumper said something like, "This is Randy Kindig from the Floppy Days Podcast, and I just love me some CoCo, and nobody does it better than Steve Strobridge. You're listening to CoCoTALK." So that was the bumper you recorded for me.
Was it? To me.
Yeah, and I play that.
I don't even remember doing that.
I also remember when we first started this show, and when we started doing it in the podcast format, I was extremely overzealous, and I remember reaching out to you and the Trash Talker stuff, saying, "Man, I'd really love if you guys could run a spot for me, and I'll run a spot for you guys. If you could run me every single episode you did." And everybody was like very polite and stuff. But yeah, we can't promise you we'll run you every episode, but we'll try to run you when we can. But I was just so excited about being on a podcast and doing stuff, and I was like really trying to get some cross-pollination going with you and the Trash Talkers and stuff like that. So no, but it's been an interesting journey for us. And for us, the podcast is a secondary market for what we do because we're mostly live, but then we also then take that audio and publish it. And I did find completely unexpectedly that people enjoyed that, as for all the reasons you mentioned, that it's so easy to listen to audio anywhere. I was both foolishly and selfishly thinking, well, people are going to listen to this and not know what we're talking about, and then they're going to turn around and watch it on YouTube. And so I was hoping I would turn listeners into viewers, because back then I was doing it on a monetized channel, and I had the dreams of making money on YouTube, which have been long abandoned. But so I did it for all the wrong reasons, and it just turns out it's been a value add to the community having the podcast that people can listen to on the go, and so it's nice to have that. But for us, it's really this doing it live first is first and foremost, and then the audio replay is just a value add. And I don't really consider our show a podcast per se, because when I think of a podcast, I think it's something like your show, where there's a specific format. It's actually professional. It's produced. It's edited. Where this show is very free form. So
train wreck.
I can certainly see the merits. I mean, this is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I'm always happy to reciprocate and put a bumper on Floppy Days for CoCoTALK as well, if you want to send me something.
Okay. Yeah, we'll work on that.
I get about 2,000 downloads for every show, so
that's good.
It's a reasonable number. I'm always surprised.
Yeah.
When you get to 1983 with your show and the micro color computer comes up,
the MC10.
Yes.
MC10. It's funny because particular episodes, will get a higher download. It's like, okay, there must be a big community for that one.
Right.
For that particular model.
Interesting.
Well, thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it. This has been great.
Thank you, and thank your wife too. We appreciate that.
Yeah,
so
for allowing us to have you for all this time.
Yeah.
Now I got to go look at mattresses. So.
All right.
You'll be sleeping good.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks for all
Randy.
you've done.
All right. Thank you. See you later.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Retro Tech Heads. Data Soup here. You're watching CoCoTALK, the world's leading live talk show featuring the Tandy color computer and proudly Patreon sponsored by RetroTechTime.com.
Hi, this is Eddie Zerbinski from beautiful Quebec City. Vous écoutez CoCoTALK.
At CoCoTALK, we'd like to thank the patrons who sponsor our program. So our heartfelt gratitude goes out to Alan Huffman, Alan Murphy, Blair Ledoux, Boatin Aaron, Brendan Donahue, Brian Weasler, Ciaran Anscomb, D. Bruce Moore, Daniel Williams, Diego, Eric Canales, Glenn Hewlett, Graham Vebke, Grant Leedy, Henry Strickland, Jason Downs, Ken Reichard, Malfunk, Michael Pitsley, Paul Fiscarelli, Paul Shoemaker, Paul Thayer, Retro Tech Time, Rick Hewlin, Rob Inman, Rocky Hill, Stephen Wagner, Steve Batson, Steve Rasmussen, Terry Steen, Terry Steggy, The Backyard Shed Gang, Tim Thayer, Tom C., Tom Gunderson, Tom Heron, Tom S., Tony C., and William Athing. Thank you ever so much, patrons.
Hi, this is Eddie Zerbinski from beautiful Quebec City. Vous écoutez CoCoTALK.
As you're enjoying CoCoTALK, we also want to remind you about the CoCo Discord server. This is a place where people come to connect, to ask questions, to provide answers, to share information, and to socialize. So when you're done, why don't you head on over to the CoCo Discord server and we'll continue the conversation there. The easy to remember link is discord.cocotalk.live. See you on Discord. CoCo123 is the Glenside Color Computer Club community newsletter that's been in publication since 1985. While the Rainbow magazine may be gone, it doesn't mean you still can't have a cool CoCo periodical. Head on over to the Glenside Color Computer website at glensideccc.com and then click on the Documents link to view all the past issues of the CoCo123 newsletter. Not only can you read all of the past and present issues, we'd also love to hear some submissions from you. So if you'd like to send an article, a column, something to talk about, maybe even a program listing, send an email to glensideccc@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. The CoCo World Map is a cool community resource where you can view coconuts from around the world. Head on over to map.cocotalk.live and see where your fellow coconutsians happen to be living on the planet Earth. If you would like to submit yourself to be on the CoCo map, send an email to cocotalk@cocotalk.live, and we look forward to seeing you on the CoCo map. Hey guys, it's Stevie Stroh, and if you've been watching CoCoTALK for a while, hopefully you understand that everyone is welcome to join this show. You don't need an impressive resume to get on. You just need to enjoy the CoCo and be willing to talk about it. There is no wrong way to CoCo. There is no wrong way to be a fan of the CoCo. There's no wrong way to be on CoCoTALK. You just have to want to talk CoCo. So if you would like to join us, then reach out to us on our Discord server, which is discord.cocotalk.live, or send an email to cocotalk@cocotalk.live, and let's get you on the show and let's talk about the CoCo.
Hi, I'm Tim, and you're watching CoCoTALK Live. And I'm playing Daggerath online like that idiot from the book.
Can you dial back on the condescension there as you respond there?
We now return you to CoCoTALK.
It's time for everyone's favorite segment, Who's New to Discord This Week?
Matt. Hey guys. Thank you for accepting me into the group. My name is Mauricio. I live in Brazil, in the southern part, in a city called Porto Alegre. I collect a few lines of old computers and video games, like Atari, Odyssey by Magnavox, ZX Spectrum, TRS-80 Color Computer, MSX, and others. Sprybug. My name is Chris. I'm into mostly the classic 8-bit systems, but primarily the CoCo. I've created some Atari 2600 homebrew games such as Princess Rescue, Zippy the Porcupine, and I'm just about finished with my latest one, Robot Zed. I am also currently working on a CoCo 2 replica project with both vintage and modern parts and tech, along with some modern advancements. Loof. I'm Yuri. I'm pretty into everything, retro or not, but the CoCo holds a special place for me as it was my first, second and third computer when I was a kid. House is full of retro stuff to the point we joke we should put an entrance price to enter. Patrick. Clover. Hi everyone, I am Patrick and have been a long-time user of 8-bit gear including Apple IIs, TRS-80 Model 2 and 3, Atari 800 and the CBM PET. I am very interested in operating systems and want to learn more about and run OS 9 as I remember a long time ago at hosting one of the first multi-user BBSs that I dialed into.
The previous bios were edited for time's sake. Thanks to Melly, Boysantech, Paul Fiscarelli, Terry Stagee, and the CoCoTALK patrons for boosting the server. Please consider joining Discord and visiting the welcome section to read these bios in full and see what the community has to offer. At discord.cocotalk.live.
CoCo Thoughts by Samuel Gimes. Played downland, found the bouncing boulders,
High Score Challenge with
Nick Marotta.
Welcome everybody to this, the 100th CoCoTALK Game On Challenge of the Week segment. This week we revisited a game that had one of the highest number of score submissions in the previous 99 segments. And that game was Downland. Now just to refresh your memory, here were the scores submitted back in week 15. And this time around, we had a total of 19 players. We had Mark B with 1,281, Damon Beals with 1,538, Rich N with 3,286, Mr. Dave 6309, 3,517, Boat of Car 3,606, CoComan 4,659, Kathleen 5,493, Jim Rye 5,550, Brian Walsh 10,315, CoCo Discord user 11,449, L Curtis Boyle 12,355, David Ladd 12,678, Grant B 12,830, Sloopy Malibu 13,618, Canadian Retro Things 13,669, Tasman 16,295, David Craker 24,781, Buck Owens 36,897, and the number one score this week was Redbeard with 37,701. Thanks to everybody that participated this week, and we will see you next week.
Well,
so we had a different winner this week.
And I beat my old record by excess, It was like 305, I think, last time. So I did much better this time.
Yeah, I beat mine. I think I almost doubled my score from the last time. So,
and I didn't even participate last time, which kind of surprised me. I guess I must have been busy and didn't have my little lunch hour break.
Okay, so I looked back in the archives and found one review here in the April 1985 Rainbow. And yeah, basically, sorry, my cat just, ouch. Okay.
Yeah,
my cat just took a chunk out of my arm.
Cat-related mishap. Been there, done that. On air.
So the
I just barfed on air.
Even though the original writer of the program said that it had nothing to do with Mario, the review starts off with saying it could have been subtitled Mario's Underground Adventures, since the sound effects and the men bear a striking resemblance to the classic game. And also talks about how you really should use a self-centering Tandy Deluxe joystick with it, so it's a good reason to buy it. Which is true, because last time I played with the Black Beauty and this time with the Deluxe joystick, I just about doubled my score. So anyways, they liked it. And let's see. What was the other one? Where did I have some scores here somewhere.
Oh, the Rainbow scoreboard?
Yeah. Oh, it's in the same thing. I shouldn't have quit sharing. There we go. Now, the Rainbow scoreboard has somebody that scored 20,900,400, which I find a little
I'm saying
hard
shenanigans
to
on that one.
Yeah, because just based on Buck Owens' video where he beat all 10 scores, took him about 15 minutes, scored about 33,000 points. This person would have had to wrap the game about 630 times, which would have taken about 157 hours. So
I'm sure what happened here is the guy submitted 3 scores. He got 20 points, then he got 900, then he got 400, and Rainbow just mistook it. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, because that's almost 7 straight days of playing the game. And, since you can't win 3 men in the game, you would have had to do it all on
You can pause. I guess that's one.
You can pause, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not buying that one either.
No, I'm not buying it either. And since Sloopy's not here, we'll just jump right into the CoCoTALK live show. Yeah, we had quite a few people in the live broadcast.
That comment on the screen there, this game is so hard, pretty well sums it up for me.
Yeah. It is a frustrating game, which actually made the live broadcast quite amusing to listen to. So I was actually having a lot of fun there, just listening to people get quite angry at playing it. I was hoping Stevie was going to join us and rage quit after a couple of minutes, but
he rage quit before he even started. That's how bad it is.
There we go.
There was a lot of angry breakfast foods being named.
We had the whole Waffle House.
Yeah, mostly by Sloopy. It is a bit of a frustrating game, but
it's one you had to earn your way to getting a good score. Like, you could get good at it if you practiced, and you had a self-centering joystick of some sort.
Yeah.
I mean, even Sloopy, like, he spent the first half an hour. He couldn't even get off the bottom level of the first chamber.
Yeah, he was.
And then he eventually got where he's into the second chamber. I might even made it to third. So eventually you do get better. You kind of have to learn the game, the nuances. Like, if you fall off a rope and an acid drops right beside you, you get instantly killed. But if you leave yourself on the rope before the acid, or wait for the acid drop to hit the ground, then jump off, you're fine. That type of thing.
Yeah,
there's a lot of.
And I died that way a lot. So.
Yeah. That hang off to one side. Yeah.
Yeah, and on later levels, you have to do that. I mean, because the acid drops are too close, so you have to literally hang off the side. And if two come down at the exact same time, you're just screwed. Or you try to jump on the wall and hope it's got one of those little divots you can hang on to. The worst thing for me is the timing of the joystick. Like, when you're trying to go on that one, the chamber we're looking at right now, actually, that little stair step case there on the lower middle.
Yes.
To the right.
As a kid, I'm not even sure I ever made it past that part.
Because basically you have to be a pixel perfect when you start the jump, and you have to hit left with the joystick and the jump button at the exact right time. Because if you take a single step, you've already walked too far and you can't get up the level. So you have to constantly try to, hit the button at the exact right time. A little too late, a little too early, it won't work. So it's a very unforgiving it's a pixel perfect game in a lot of respects.
Yeah. And we did have Buck Owens did a video. Let's see, where did I put that one? In some interesting colors. It was the
Dragon version,
32 version. So I think that would have just made it more frustrating to play it in this color palette.
Now you want to claw out your eyeballs and throw the joystick across the room.
Exactly.
Ugh.
As a bit of an aside note here, this is something I wish that the people that did Dragon, they're not really ports, actually. I mean, most of the time all they did, if they patched the keyboard routine, and that was as far as they went. To be honest, for the Dragon, the graphics for a lot of the CoCo games that are ported to the Dragon, especially if they're P14 artifacting ones, should have been redesigned a little bit, like change the shapes and some of the color defaults. Because you could pick better ways. Like, if you look at Mario here, because it actually used a mixture of the artifact colors and the detail, kind of like Donkey King barrels and stuff too. It looks great on an artifacted screen because you can actually see detail of the white. But when you switch it to a raw P mode 3, which is all they did here, they just switched it from P mode 3 to P mode 4, or P mode 4 to P mode 3, sorry, then you end up getting these two adjacent pixels of totally different colors, where it would look like a smooth white transition on the CoCo on the NTSC. It looks like a garish mess on here. And all they had to really do is just redesign the graphics slightly, and they could have made these look a lot better than they did, but not many companies took the time to do that. They would just, switch it from P mode 4 to P mode 3, and, that's a wrap, sell it, which is a bit disappointing, but.
And then, of course, in Buck's video here, he does make it through the 10th chamber. Let me just find the right spot. Okay, so here he's just in the 10th chamber, about to beat the game. And rather than take the long way, he just sacrifices the guy and jumps to the bottom of the screen here.
I don't know this multi-screens you guys are talking about.
Can confirm there's at least 3 of them, but beyond that, and then there's those stupid stairs that
Here comes the so exciting transition from beating all the screens to going back to the beginning. And there we go.
Amazing.
Yeah. As mentioned on my page when I email interviewed Michael, the author of this game, he actually did have an actual ending sequence. But the program was, I think, 1.25K too big to fit on an 8K ROM, and Tandy said, "You're not getting a 16K ROM. You have to fit it 8." So we had to strip all that out. I think if I remember, he even had another level beyond that too. So unfortunately,
it's not too late for him to release that.
He doesn't have it anymore. Even back when I interviewed him, which was probably 2001 or 2 or something like that, he said, "No, he got rid of most of his CoCo stuff at the time." So
yeah, he'll just have to remake it from memory.
I don't think he has any interest whatsoever in doing it.
Well, it's dead easy, I know.
Have you finished yours yet, Rick? Actually, you were working on your Risk style game.
Yeah, it's in, I guess you would say, play testing now. I got everything fixed that was broken, and so thumbs up.
I'll get an entry on my page for that, and then we'll get it up in the archive too, because that was one I didn't even know you wrote a game.
Oh yeah, well, it was the only one that was really worth looking at. So, well, we'll see. I keep finding, well, first that 30 years ago I had no idea what I was doing, or something, and I'm finding all these new little bugs that I didn't. RGB colors on a CM8 versus RGB colors on the LCD screen are different.
Yeah,
very slightly. And because I'm tweaking the palettes, it's broken now. So now I have to fix it. So yeah, it's been fun. No,
it's a little bit risky changing palettes.
Exactly. So yeah, I have completely decoded my 30-year-old self and written it down, and I've got these little sheets of paper now with all my variables and go subs and all of that, which it was entirely it's like fixing your kid's homework, But yeah, so pretty soon I want to Risk. It takes 6 hours to run through a game.
Yeah.
So play testing is a little bit tedious.
Have you given it to anybody else to play test?
Not recently. I just this morning I was looking at it before the show and realized that I forgot to save the last of my changes from yesterday. So I had to go back and
redo them again.
Well, I still remember what they were. Yeah, put them in again.
And of course, my question that everybody expects me to ask, when's the Nitrous 9 version coming up?
Oh, right. I wrote this entirely to get around the shortcomings of Disk Basic. So writing it in a sensible language would be just writing a new game. This wouldn't have anything to do with it.
Anyway, sorry, Kim, I kind of
no problem. Little tangent, but
it's still game related though. So
yeah, still game related, but and possibly I don't know. Is it a 2-player game that you're making, Rick?
3 to 6.
3 to 6. So,
but it's a like.
So probably not a game really on challenge game.
Not much of a challenge game, unless you want to do it by mail like them old chess matches.
or we make it one of those secondary games, like we're talking about doing adventure games. We'd have a main challenge one, but a second one that week that isn't score based.
But for tips and tricks on Downland, other than it learning what the pixel perfect jumps and everything are, you don't have to get all the keys. Some of the keys open up doors that you don't have to go back through. So.
They're still worth points, though. So
they're still worth points, but if you're going for trying to get through the game, that's the only thing I can think of. Anybody
get
else?
A self-centering joystick. That's my highest recommendation.
It's a good reason to invest in one, or fix the one you have.
Yeah, and you only need a 1-button one for Downland. You don't need the 2-button deluxe. So. And I know, like Nick Morendes, you mentioned to me in private, this is your favorite game of all time, right?
Yeah. Well, he was mentioning that during the stream too. How impressed he was with the game and the amazing tricks.
It was a graphical tour de force. It was awesome play.
Somebody get a shovel.
How he is just striving to make a game that good.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll have more on that later on the show.
Okay, well, that was Downland. So
I guess we will see what next week's game is going to be.
And for those of you who missed last week, Down was voted on by people.
Yeah.
So
it was voted on as a repeat game.
Wasn't my choice.
And does anybody recognize this game?
Touchstone with patches to the palette.
Yeah, I just changed the palette before I loaded it. So
now I will mention for Touchstone, there is a 639 optimized version available for those of you that have 639 CPUs. It does not speed up the game. The game is frame locked, but it does smooth the animation so it doesn't get that kind of ripple effect. So it runs smoother, but it won't change the gameplay really at all.
And it's available in all the usual places. So,
and it's a clone of Tutankhamun from the arcade. And I think Nick, you've played a few of these Tutankhamun clones because there's some by Aardvark. There's some, Mark Data Products had a few that are fairly close. I think this is your favorite clone of Tutankhamun.
Yeah, this is one of the few CoCo 2 games that I would actually play.
Oh, so we can expect a score from you this week?
Maybe.
It'll beat his Downland score for sure. So,
and okay, well, so that is the game on for next week. So,
okay,
should mention CoCo 1 and 2. I think there's a Dragon version of it as well. It requires 32K and a joystick.
And you can get that palette on the CoCo 3 by changing the palette to 00, is it, or 11?
00 will give you the black background. Yeah.
Yeah, 00. Otherwise, it is a bright green background, I believe. So
yeah, you can actually change the other
eyes.
colors too if you want. Yeah. Like if you don't like the yellow, the red, and the blue, you can change it to something else as well.
Didn't Touchstone have a problem somewhere with the CoCo 3? I think when we were playing it, I don't know if it was the sound or something that we discovered was a bit odd on the CoCo 3.
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah, well, we'll find out this week, I guess.
Yeah.
Ken, when you tried it, were you on the CoCo 3 or CoCo 2?
I was on the CoCo 3. It seemed to run fine. I actually didn't have the sound on because I was listening to a podcast at the time. So
I seem to recall there was something funny about it, but anyway.
Yeah, because it actually has background sound playing the whole time you're playing too. So
I kept dying. Is that a problem?
That's it.
I'm getting some weird flickering on my CoCo 3, but I don't know.
All right, ready for the game on news?
Sure.
If
okay, so you want me to go straight into it, Mark, or
it's ready for you now?
Okay. So the first thing I'll go is a follow-up to last week's interview with the Coco Brothers ×2. There was some stuff that was mentioned on the show by the Leany brothers, and we've actually got some stuff that they found since the interview that we can show. So I will start with that. So if you remember, they were mentioning that Kevin had to put his daughter in the trash can to keep her kind of occupied so she wouldn't keep hitting the keyboard and stuff. And they actually have a picture of this. So this is Kevin back in the day with his daughter Susan in the trash can. And I guess Susan actually watched the episode and actually supplied the picture. So it's all in good fun. But yeah, that was kind of funny that we actually have the picture now of the actual incident in question. She looks pretty happy. I don't know, she doesn't look too, taken out of things there. So that's babysitting at its finest. What can I tell you?
All right, swoosh that can back and forth a couple times, and she's happy again.
He's still having to hang on to the trash can, though, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think my trash can's better.
I don't know, man. This one has a kid in it, so yours can't compare, Nick. So that was the first one, and then some of the historical stuff he was talking about. So he's got the FADAC computer here. And this is the one, and his quote here was, "This is a picture of the FADAC computer I used in the Army. I should have got one with the Nixie tubes lit, but oh well. And I do have to admit, we weren't always on target. We sent one round into a ball field and another just missed a rage road, both of which were not my fault and got considerable attention. So I do know the ball field near Henderson in Las Vegas is for where the there's a AAA minor league team there. I think it's called the Las Vegas Aviators now, but would have been the 51s, I think, back in the day. So I'm not sure if that's the one he's talking about or a different one, but that's the old computer we used back in the day, and we got some good stories out of them on that during the show. The next one here, this is more for the Thayer brothers because Kevin married a Thayer. Now they're not related because, as Paul and Tim explained, they had a name change from when they originally had their ancestors move to the States. They weren't originally called Thayers, and they just kind of chose that to become more Americanized type thing. But Kevin's comment here, I thought the Thayers would get a kick out of the picture of the depot I have in my backyard. It was used for the in-laws when they would stay with us. The population was correct then, and the elevation is correct. So they'd have the 6 family members come stay, and that was, Thayer, population 6. So, thought that was kind of cute. And then one other thing he mentioned on the show last week, slots and cards, which was a CoCo 3 version. It was the more advanced version, also on the Atari ST and the Amiga, which they mentioned those were ported by other people. But they actually wrote the version for the PC, and they got a huge boost in sales when rather famous columnist John C. Dvorak wrote about it in PC Magazine. And that's when he was on holidays and came back to tons of mail for orders. And he actually scanned in the actual review of it here. So this is John C. Dvorak's column in the Viewpoints column. It's from the September 13th, 1988 issue of PC Magazine. Now, PC Magazine was actually published more than monthly, and I kind of had forgotten about that. I can't remember if it was bi-weekly or weekly, but it was published multiple times a month. So basically at the tail end here, under genuinely interesting software, they have the kind of mini review of the Nimbus collection of general video slot machine and video poker games, and kind of goes how it's sold and where they could order it from, etc. So that's the one that really got things going. And probably the best thing here is this last paragraph here. This is superb software because they work with a slot machine mechanic to get the feel of the video slots and the odds absolutely perfect. So perfect that it seems as though this stuff could easily be thrown on a cheap clone in the back room of a sleazy St. Louis bar and actually used for illegal gambling, which I thought was a pretty interesting comment to make. But yeah, they talked about the fact that they were trying to get the balance of the reels right and the weird reel rings with the different teeth, and getting it to match the exact same odds as the actual machines used in Las Vegas. So it's pretty big getting a write-up by John Dvorak, because he's a pretty well world famous columnist in the tech community, and has been for decades and decades. So, and he's written for Mac Magazine, he's written for PC magazines, he wrote stuff for InfoWorld back in the day before the Mac and PC were even the thing. So that was a huge thing. And as he mentioned, that their sales spiked pretty well overnight after this got published. So I did want to mention all of that. Next up now into the regular Game On news. First up, we got a couple of Jim Gerrie things. So the first one here is a game that was originally for the Sinclair ZX81 by a person calling themselves Dr. Beep, and he's calling it Pooper. It had a bit more risque name originally on the Sinclair, and basically it's a dog running around and dropping things that you have to kind of clean up type thing. So I'll play a little bit of that. It's using the inverse mode here. The dog's the ampersand and you're the X, trying to clean everything up. Kind of reminds me a bit of Crazy
backyard.
Yeah. Or your bed with the cat puke. That could be that.
He's a very precise dog.
Anyways, it was a cute little game. It's a 10-line basic program. So it's one of those 10-liner contest type things. Now, we'll be getting this more into the regular news a little bit too, and a little bit later in the Game On news too. But Robert Sieg, we mentioned last week, has created a graphical font generation program in machine language for the MC10 that actually takes the text screen and then redraws it in graphics. And you have a redefinable character set then, and it actually has the same resolution, 32 by 16, in lower mode of 128 by 96. I think your characters end up being 4 by 6 pixels or something like that. So he's been experimenting with that, and he's been posting some of the stuff. He's been using the Game Boy graphics editor that you can get freely available for designing the graphics, the 4-color graphics for the MC10. And he actually gave a copy of it to Jim. So Jim decided to try it on this particular game. So he actually did some custom font stuff here to draw a little mini dog and that kind of stuff. And he actually made a new version of it. which I'll show here. And it actually interfaces with the actual BASIC itself here, like some of the solutions we have in the CoCo. Now, one thing I did not see in the CoCo was color coding characters and keywords in BASIC in a different color. So it kind of looks like a more modern IDE style thing. Now, of course, the res is fairly low because it's the MT10, and this is not one that has been modified to be able to use more than 3K graphics screen. But that's actually kind of cool that you can list in BASIC and actually get colorized, like your symbols and your numbers are blue and your keywords and text are in yellow, so you can kind of follow your code a bit easier. But this is what it looks like running with that graphics thing. I mean, it's obviously tile-based looking in this case, but it does look, more graphical, and it runs at a pretty decent clip, actually. And we'll get more into that, the FSP, which is the full screen project, as Robert Sieg's calling it. We'll cover that a little bit later in the Game On News, because Robert himself did some demos, also based on some Jim Gerrie games, and then he also had a general tutorial on using the Game Boy graphics editor and stuff. We'll get into the regular news as well. So after that, we've got an update from Pierre Serrazin and Kees Van Os, the weekly update to the AGD Spectrum conversion. So this is pack number 47 with another 6 games. We've got Nevermore, Papyrus, Quest for Elements, Ray's Reprisal, which, as you'll see, is a clone of Yar's Revenge from the Atari 2600, if you guys are familiar with that game. Restless Andre and Stripping Penelope, which sounds a bit risque. I didn't see any risque pictures in here, but it very well could be when you actually play the game. So I'll be upfront that could be a slightly adult game. Here's Nevermore. Now, this one was kind of interesting to me because it looks more like a graphical adventure game style. It doesn't look like, I haven't played it, so I can't tell you for sure, but it doesn't look like it's a standard AGD puzzle platformer shooter type thing. This looks more like an adventure interactive game with some pretty, neat graphics, like little skeletons on the bottom there, kind of surrounding the text, etc. So I'd be interested if somebody gets a chance to try that one to let us know what it kind of plays like. This is part of the Papyrus Mummy Legacy here. That looks more like a typical AGD platformer. And it's got acid drops or something there, so maybe it's like Downland, just as fun. And Stripping Penelope, which is the one, like I said, might be a bit risque, judging by that graphic there, though I didn't see any particularly risque stuff in the actual gameplay from the shots he's put up, and maybe he specifically chose ones that wouldn't be possibly offensive to some people.
That's the easy level screen, you'll note.
What's that?
That's the easy level screen where she's clothed.
Maybe it could be, I'm not sure. Rick, please try it out and report back to us next week. And Quest for Elements. And this one looks like a bit of a different take on the engine too, unless that's just kind of backgrounds and stuff here, but it looks a little bit different than some of the other ones we've seen. And here's the Yar's Revenge one now. The artwork for the cover page for it here actually is basically the Atari 2600 manual for those of you who've seen the game. Rather well rendered for 2 colors. And then the scoring looks a bit different than the Atari 2600, but the game here, I mean, this looks like Yar's Revenge for those of you who've played it, with the little shimmering energy barrier. Of course, they don't have a little rainbow colors the Atari version had, but the game looks very close, so it'd be interesting to take on that one, because I don't think we ever got a Yar's Revenge clone on the CoCo or Dragon before that I know of. So if it plays well, it might be nice to have another arcade clone.
It'd be a good one to do in semi-graphics mode.
That would be a good one, because it's a lot of horizontal colored lines with as many colors you can fit on, yeah. And then here's Restless Andre. That looks more like a typical, maze puzzler type thing. So that's the ones they introduced this week, and I think they've still got another 3 or 4 weeks of 6 games a week here coming out. So there's more to come. And then, of course, after the show last week, we have Tim Thayer has put up the rough draft for the big money board for Card Sharks. Said more works to be done, but does anyone have any suggestions? So this is a CoCo 3, their next card game, because they've done a bunch of others we covered on the show last week. And of course, they did their escape room game they released last week. I don't know how many of you have ever tried it, or maybe have a bit of a mini review we can talk about here. But this is the next game that Tim's planning on working on, another card game, and I'm probably based on some of the casino stuff he's does for his day job. So for anybody here that watched the show last week and downloaded the escape room game, have any of you on the panel here played it, and what was your thoughts on the game, if you have?
Crickets.
I mean, I played it as part of the beta test, so I kind of already covered that on last week's show, but did anybody get a chance to download and play it? Ken, Mark, anybody? Jason?
Anybody?
Bueller.
Still awake?
Bueller. Please, don't everyone talk at once.
I did see some comments on Facebook, and it looks like a lot of people are having fun with it. And some people had not even solved it yet, because it's a different style of game. If you're not used to, like when I first tried it, I had no idea what I was doing. I actually had to ask Paul and Tim a couple of times, and then I kind of got an idea what the game's on, because I've never played the escape room genre, which apparently is fairly popular in phones and stuff these days, but I'd never really played any of those. So now you guys have homework. Play it and come back for a mini review next week and let us know what you think.
Yeah.
Next up, this is Robert Sieg's own video. So this is kind of showing multiple things at once here. So he's got the MC10 emulator running in the upper left, and then he's got the map level display, which is actually live displaying what the text screen would look like if you were just doing it in the raw text. So this is taking like some of the old Jim Gerrie stuff or some of his own stuff here. You can see that in the middle. And then he's got the Game Boy graphic tile designer on the far right, where he shows like he's drawing shading and everything else. And he goes through a couple of different game projects. He does some stuff that Jim Gerrie's done. He's done some stuff where he fiddles with animations and things on his own. So I'll just show a little bit of that. But you can actually watch this screen on the left here doing the graphical representation. The screen in the middle will show you what the low-res SG4 mode would look like. And you can kind of see it live translating as it's going across.
Games that I'm modding.
Unfortunately, Robert's really quiet, and I already got this crank. So.
What I've done is I've taken this Game Boy tile designer, and I've taken the map level display under debug window, and I make it so you can see the regular screen.
I don't know if you guys can hear that at all. I can barely hear myself.
Our hexadecimal number for the current screen that's over here. And I've already edited these
here.
It's loading
but you can see the translation here, like when it drew this screen here, and what it looks like in the original text mode. And now you can see it live doing both at the same time. So basically, one of his goals on this project, besides having the ability to do graphics, text with redefinable character sets and doing higher res, is that he wants to make this as seamless as possible, so that in most cases, if you have an existing basic game, it will actually let you just basically install this driver and run it, and you don't have to do many changes to the game itself.
Eli, you notice that the three little men are displayed at the top of the corner. I just got tagged.
I assume what he's doing is he's keeping the VDG screen, the original one, in memory still, so BASIC still runs, and he's copying it, looking at it, routines, looking at it, and recreating a second one.
Yeah, I think it's similar to what Sock did when he did his 320 by 200 VDG screen with the really big characters, the duplicate of 32 by 16. I think it's similar to that. And he maps the text and his semi-graphics characters, and of course you can redefine them. So he's actually done like, sort of 3D shaded walls here for this Berserk style game that Jim Gerrie had done. It actually looks pretty good. And the robots, he kind of made a weird, he just said he wanted to fiddle with that a little bit. He left the characters as raw, semi-graphics 4 style, but he could have, finally tuned that a little bit more too. But it definitely holds some potential because it runs a pretty decent clip. I mean, it's running a 128 by 96 by 4 color screen at pretty well keeping up with the text screen itself in BASIC. So it's not really slowing the machine down too much. Now you will notice it's fairly slow when you try to like scroll a screen, like a text screen. The scrolling is a fair bit slower. So as long as you're not doing scrolling, but you're just doing like on-screen graphics like this, it actually runs fairly decently. So you can basically upgrade a lot of the Jim Gerrie collection, and you can redefine the character set for each game individually, so that you can actually create your own tile sets, etc., for it as well. Even customize the text itself if you want to. So it holds some potential to get some much more impressive looking games on the MC10 with not much effort, because he tried to get it so that some of these games you don't have to change a darn thing. You just install the driver and run. Or in some cases, you might want a new tile set, to make it look a little bit better. There's some things you will have to change on certain things that are a little bit different that you'll have to kind of adjust for, but it's pretty minimal. And I remember the CoCo back in the day, like 82 through 84, there was a ton of these screen driving programs, the Solution, Screen 64, Super Screen Machine, Hi-Res 2 by Surcomp. There's a bunch of others I can't remember off the top of my head. But they were usually meant more for doing higher amount of text on the screen, like a 42 by 21 column or a 51 by 24 column to give you more text. And a few of them had little game elements, and they'd have scroll protect areas and stuff. But I haven't seen anything like that on the MC10 before, so this actually looks pretty good. So anyway, you have MC10s. I would love to see if you try this out and even try the Game Boy Tile Designer here, because it works really well for the 4 colors that the MC10 has, and see what you guys can come up with, or even what your opinions of it are, and any possible improvements we can send on to Robert. I'm trying to remember if he had some other animations. You might be looking at a different game or something. This was kind of trying to do a 3D dungeon crawl. Now, here the colors didn't really work. It's a little bit too washed out looking, and it wasn't that quick on the original low res either, but you can see hints of some of the potential of doing something like this too. But just an idea on the speeder, you can watch this timer going down. Now, if you were trying to draw that in BASIC, especially the MC10, which doesn't have high-res graphics commands unless you get an MCX 128 or SD32 type thing, it's actually running at a pretty good clip. So you definitely could do some stuff you wouldn't be able to do. Even CoCo Basic wouldn't be able to draw that in BASIC that fast. Yeah, it's a really cool project, and it's actually one of the most exciting things from a software BASIC developer standpoint I've seen on the MC10 in quite a while, besides the compiler. I think if you combine the two, like if this actually works with compiled programs, that would be awesome. And next up, this is just the generic...
this house has cable TV.
The generic page for the Amigos, but they're actually doing a live taping of the next CoCo show tomorrow, Sunday, at roughly 3 to 4-ish Eastern time. Now, because they're recording multiple shows in a row, and sometimes they go smooth, sometimes they don't. I mean, I would probably go in a little bit early if you want to catch the live stream and join in the chat. But they'll be reviewing Draconian, which is one of my personal favorites. So if you guys want to pop by the chat, I'll see you guys there, and we'll go check it out. But they're recording a whole their shows. They got the new Atari ST show, for those of you who are the fan of the Atari ST. They did the Amigo show on Friday, so they're also doing the Spectrum show, and they're also doing their Ask the Amigos, which is a monthly thing where they just take random questions that people post on the Discord of absolutely any subject under the sun. Doesn't have to be retrocomputing and not involved at all. Those are usually fun because they get a lot of weird questions sometimes. So that's on tomorrow. And last but not least, in the game segment here, we have the latest blog from Nick. This is for 0 Hour, Chapter 13, all levels complete. I will scroll up to the screens, and then if you want to kind of discuss things, Nick, go for it.
Okay, that's my cue to wake up. And let's see. Well, I skipped having a monthly blog last month because I was getting so close to finalizing the last few levels. I thought, nah, I'll just keep going. And I just thought I'll just finish them all and get them out of the way. And that's what this is. I've done all the levels in the game. Now, when I say all the levels themselves all function. There's still other parts of the game that I have to do, such as being able to throw your EMF bombs so that you can disable robots, and the robots still can't hurt you. So there's still a few things to do, but each of the individual levels all come up, and whatever machinery is on that level all works now. So I don't know what screen you're looking at there, Curtis, but it's.
Is there a particular screen you want me to show? Or?
There we are. No, there I am. It was my fault.
Well, it usually is, but go on.
There's something I don't say often. So I thought I'll do a big gallery of all the levels, except for the very last one. I figured I'll make that a bit of a surprise, and that's the level where the big nuclear bomb is that you're ultimately meant to go and disable. That's on the very last level, which you have to complete all the other levels in order to get to the main one anyway. So I've left that as a bit of a hopefully surprise for people.
And one nice thing I want to mention here before you go on, Nick, is that unlike your previous platforming games like Group of Rhythm, etc., this one you can actually see all 12 of the other levels in any order, so you don't have to earn your way like in Popstar or Gunstar.
No, you can enter a room and exit and go into another room, and sort of like an adventure game, I guess. Whatever you completed in that level remains completed, so you can exit and come back and pick up where you left off. So in every one of those levels, you've got to disable the security system in there. And that's just basically going and walking over a certain object to change it from red to green. It's all it is. But with all those levels, there are robots that might be in the way. So you've got to make sure you have enough EMF charges to throw at them, which will disable them so you can get past them. It doesn't kill them. It'll just disable them temporarily so you can get past them. So I haven't tuned that part, but there probably won't be enough EMF bombs charges to go around, which means you'll have to exit the room and find it in another room. And even if you can't find enough, you can always go to the slot machine level and gamble some of your bomb countdown timer away to have a shot at the slot machine and hopefully win a few more EMF bombs, or better still, a free life. So I've tried to make every level to have a bit of a mini game in it, so it's not the same thing over and over in each level.
Yeah, that was one thing I wanted to point out, actually, because I mean, in previous games, you're basically playing with the same rough mechanics on each level.
Yeah. I mean, every screen's got a rough mechanic to it, but then it's also got some special
something unique
attribute. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, a bit of variety, I hope. Now, I think if you scroll down a little bit more, I asked the question, platform or adventure? Because it's obviously a platform game, but it's not a platform game like Chet Simpson's Digger 3, or, it's not a high-speed platform game. It's not one where you can just run around, jump and collect and kill and whatever. It's a little bit slower than that. It's a bit more of an adventure in that you've got to find EMF bombs and exit rooms, enter rooms to collect more. And yeah, there's a bit of a adventure element. So I would
say personally, I would think it's a bit more puzzly, I guess, than adventure.
Yeah, it's not even a big puzzle. I mean, there's nothing really hard to work out, but I don't know what I didn't know.
Yeah,
what
it's kind of a cross between multiple
it's
things.
It's a bit of a mashup more than anything. And the game has no scoring. There is no scoring in the game. It's really just a mission. You've got to go from the bottom floor and get to the top before the bomb goes off to win. So there's no scores to get. You just playing against the clock, basically.
Yeah. So this is going to suck for the high score challenge, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, that's right. For anyone who likes scores, well, too bad. I wasn't really a big fan of just running around these sort of things to collect scores, mainly because I don't get very good scores. This is more of a mission. The goal is to get through it all and work your way to the top level to finally defeat the bomb. And the bomb, it's not too hard, but you've got to work out a code to disable the bomb. the final level.
That's where the adventure element I guess comes in.
I guess so. Yeah. So hence I didn't know really what to call it, and I just chose platform adventure. Stick all the words together. One of them will stick. So I've called it a platform.
Yeah, I would add puzzle a little bit in there because you got the puzzle of figuring out the combo.
Yeah, that's 3 words. That gets expensive.
And then you also get it's also a Vegas slot machine here too. So I mean, kind of keeping the theme from last week. So.
Yeah, so it's a bit of it's a mashup. But it's something different. I thought, for anyone who likes that sort of thing, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, for me, watching you develop it over the last while, I think my favorite part of it is that it's not just like a different layout of platforms and you're doing the exact same thing. Every level has something unique.
Yeah, it's different in every one. Yeah.
So that you actually get quite a good variety of gameplay. And if you fire it up one day and all of a sudden, I don't want to have to deal with stompers, but I want to try the firestorm fireballs, you can pick and choose. So.
And I haven't made the game too hard. It's not a challenging game in that it'll keep you playing for weeks or months even. It's meant to be completed.
And we got a comment from Six, or a question from Six. He says, "Do you work out the code by playing Mastermind? Because that seems to be your theme in every other game."
It was going to be, but then I saw how many people had trouble with the Mastermind in my Gatecrasher, and I thought I need something simpler than that. So it's not Mastermind. It's similar. It's close, but it's not quite. No. It's very easy. It's not hard. It's more, for me, it was just fun doing all the graphics. It's more eye candy. It's got sound effects in there. It's got David Ladd in there as well. And it's got
a now I want it. That was a selling point for me.
It's got a bit of a crikey in there and, just a bit of a laugh here and there. It was more of a fun game, really. We'll see how people take it anyway.
So have you got a schedule at this point, or you? I mean, you mentioned that you haven't got the robots killing the player yet. So you still got coding left.
There's not much to go. If you scroll at the very bottom, I just mentioned what's left to go, and there's only really 4 things to go. I think the robots have to kill you. You have to be able to throw your EMF charges to kill them. There's another robot to go in there. It's already in there. It just doesn't appear yet. So there's a robot that if you played my Rupert Rhythm, and if you remember a big eyeball robot that used to come on and float around the screen while you were playing, that'll be in there as well. And also there's the win screen. So currently, if the timer runs out or you lose all your lives, you get the Armageddon screen, which, the bomb goes off and blows the place up. So there's a bit of a screen or effect for that. But I haven't done the win screen when you actually do disable the bomb. I'm trying to come up with some fancy
some ear and eye candy.
Yeah, some eye candy. So the win screen I have to put in there as well. Other than that, it's and then they're looking for bugs and playing with the game and trying to do tweaks and whatever. That can take a while too. So I'd imagine it's probably still a few months off, but it's getting very close.
Like I know at one time in the past you were hoping to have it ready by the fest in May. So does that still look possible?
It could be, yeah. It could still be, yeah. So it's been a lot of work. I mean, I don't think I'll be doing another one of these in a while. It's just that once you've coded the game, I've then still got another 13 little mini programs to program within the game. So it's a lot of additional coding to do. And then you've got to tweak each one and make sure it works. It's like a whole game, 13 games in one game. So it's a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of balance, like you having so many robots or things at certain timings.
There's a few screens where I originally had planned it, and then when I got into it, I thought, no, that's crap. So I just scrubbed it and redesigned it. So the levels have changed since I first started. Trying to make the game not too hard, not too easy, but just trying to strike that middle of the road balance.
Yeah.
So anyway.
No, I'm really looking forward to it. So it looks good. Any questions from the panel or the chat here on the game? Besides the mastermind question?
Feel free to laugh.
I like the idea. Leave the robots kill you till last so you can play just
Well, that was intentional. The robots can't harm you.
At the moment
when that's right. At the moment when I played, I'm sort of worried. Gee, it's a bit easy, isn't it? Oh, hang on, that's right. The robots can't kill me yet. That's why I knew there was a reason.
Yeah, this is the Stevie skill level right now. So.
Yeah, at the moment I just walk straight through them. I say, "Well, get out of my way, mate."
Stevie Stroh ready.
Yeah, that's right.
He can see all the levels and he can't die. It's pretty well. Oh no, you can die.
That's right.
You can die because you can fall off.
There is ways to falling off a platform. The machinery that's in there can kill you still. It's really just the robots that can't kill you at the moment. But that won't be long.
Yeah, and it's nice too because visually wise, it has a fairly decent variety of colors. So there's a lot of moving parts, and then of course the cogs in the background you can see on the screenshots are all animated spin.
They all spin in the background, so it gives a very, I don't know if you could say, busy screen. The cogs are dim, so they don't actually, they're not bright enough to bother you, but they're there, and they make a noise as well. You can hear the cogs,
the droning
spinning,
machinery thing,
and it's soft as well, again, so it doesn't annoy you, but you get a feeling that you are in a big factory or some big place without it overwhelming you.
So
we do have a couple of questions for you now from the chat. So the first one is from Jim Gerrie. He says, is it easier than Downland?
Much easier. I've purposely made sure it's not so pixel perfect. It does allow a bit of leeway.
Second question is from Dave Very. How many lines of code so far for this game?
Good question. I was going to get those sort of stats for today so I can announce it, but I didn't get time. I'll get that for next time. It's in the thousands, of course.
Mikey has a comment. He says, I will fall off the platforms multiple times playing this game.
Well, you can, but it's not too hard. And like I say, I did give it a bit of leeway. So,
yeah.
I mean, you are allowed to fall a certain depth. There are places in the game where you can actually jump down to a platform rather than having to find an elevator to ride down there. You can jump, but you've got to work out how far can you fall before you fall to your death. So yeah, there's a bit of leeway in there. And I've tried to make the joystick controls very intuitive. At the moment, the whole game plays with a single one-button joystick, and that allows you to do things like, run left and right, jump left and right. There were a few other things. What was the other stupid things I did? Oh, yeah, you'll be able to throw the EMF bombs. It lets you do a lot of opening and closing of doors, and it's all done by the joystick, and it's as intuitive as I could work out. So it's very easy to control. And I'm probably a grandmaster at coming up with that because I can't play the games very well at all. So it has to be easy for me. If it's easy for me, it's easy for everyone.
Yeah.
Are we going to have to turn our joysticks upside down to play this Australian game?
It's by not bilingual,
by hemisphere,
something like that. No, it's fairly straightforward. Mind you, I'm playing it with a digital joystick, but it should work with even the analog Black Beauties or the deluxe as well.
We have a nice snide comment from Tom Eric Anderson. Says, I see the gears are identical in two of the backgrounds. Isn't that a little lazy?
Well, they are. Yeah, that's right. There's about 4 different background layouts. I could have had more. Yeah, you're right. I could have had more. I could have had 8 or 16.
But it's tedious drawing all those little teeth, I think.
Yeah, I just got lazy. Well, I didn't draw the teeth. I mean, the cogs are drawn once. Each top, each cog is stored once, and then I generate the background. So when you play the game and you start a level, there is a delay, a blank screen, while it creates that background. So it colors the tiles, it lays the background, and then it overlays the actual foreground, and they're all perfectly blended together. So the things will, if there's a hole in any of the foreground graphics, you do see right through it, and you can see the cog underneath spinning still. So it's very well meshed, which was one of the things I wanted to get. Yeah.
Well, I know, like, two of the main things that you mentioned when you were starting development that you wanted to do was to make it easy enough so that people weren't getting flustered and quitting the game, which had happened a little bit on Gunstar and on Popstar.
Yeah.
And also that you wanted to make it in such a way that people could see just about the entire game without having to be an expert at it. You didn't have to earn your way to every single screen.
Well, that's the thing. I noticed with Gunstar. I mean, Gunstar has a really good last level. Especially when you get to the final boss. There's a big alien there, and there's lots of bombs and lots of firing. It goes into overdrive in that mode. But a lot of people haven't seen it because they didn't get up there, and that's a bit disappointing. So I thought with this game, you can technically see every level, well, at least all
except the last one.
Except the last one. So you can see every level, even if you're no good at playing it. You can walk into a room, look around, and then walk straight out if it looks too hard for you. But you can get to see it. So at least you get to see the eye candy. So all that work trying to put the graphics together at least won't go wasted in this game.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that makes sense to me, because I remember when we launched Gunstar and we had the gameplay on that, or even people when they were playing Popstar back in the day, because I remember seeing some like the parallax effects in the later levels of Popstar, or the big boss alien you were mentioning in Gunstar. And then you start talking to people like 6 months after the game's released. I've never seen it.
And they haven't seen it. No, I know.
What are you talking about?
So yeah, that's one thing I've learned over the years. We're not young anymore, so you're not going to get all these great pro gamers playing it for hours and getting up to the high levels.
Yeah, not everybody can be a Buck Owens, is what we're trying to tell.
Yeah, that's right. Not everyone's a Buck Owens. So this game is not tailored for Buck Owens, and it's probably not tailored for Stevie Strobridge. It's tailored for everyone else in between.
No, it's really, really good to see that you've got the basic level design now done for all 13 levels.
Yeah,
12,
that's
which
all
you can
done
see here. And good balance. A lot of different elements. Every screen has something unique to it that isn't on the other ones. Gameplay wise, not just graphically, but actually, what you're doing in the game. There's something different on every level. It's not just
it's
elevators and platforms.
Everyone, yeah.
Looking forward to it. Hope it can be done by the fest to be a good one to show off at the fest. So,
well, I am on the final. There is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, as long as the CoCoTALK train's not on it, you should be okay.
So I can finish this and start my next one.
Actually, I'll just ask, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, or maybe you don't even know. But do you have a plan for what you're planning on hitting next?
I have a few plans. It's a matter of picking one.
Okay. No dearth of ideas then.
No. It depends on, having spent so much time on this one, am I ready to jump into another big one? So I don't know. I'm thinking maybe I should just pick the smallest, easiest level idea first, do that as a recuperation before I get into another major one.
Okay.
I mean, these are the sort of games where back in the day, I guess, there would have been a team of people working on them, in that you've got artists, you've got musicians,
level designers, and
level design. Yeah, that's right. Whereas this thing's being done by a one-man band, unfortunately. So you've got to do it all. Every problem is yours.
Yeah, that's one thing I found when I started working on my game, and now I've kind of got sidetracked helping with another one. But coming up with the original ideas and stuff, that's hard. I'm not good at graphics either. Like as far as drawing and making anything look decent, that isn't my forte either, and that was extremely frustrating. So having a one-man band doing this type of stuff is quite the feat to me. Anyway, I know that was the way everybody did it back in the early 80s because there were no development teams. You just had everybody crank out a game.
The bedroom programmer. So this game has been very much done as a bedroom programmer job.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm really looking forward to it. One last comment from Tom. He said, tip for Nick, we need a good choplifter for the CoCo. Actually, there is one on the Dragon, so I've got to try to fire that one up. And
what's that, a choplifter?
Yeah.
Hi.
The old Atari Apple game.
Yeah.
Broderman. I think it was Broderman.
Nah, it's the Apple.
Well, it's on the Atari and others too. There's even an arcade version of it, but
yeah.
But there is a Dragon version. There's a semi-graphics one.
No,
I think if I remember, that one's way too hard. If I remember correctly,
Yeah.
we showed it on the show. That you actually have to rescue the people.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
All right, that's it for the game on news. I will mention one other thing. Paul Shoemaker was going to try to be on the show today to do an update on Poker Squares, some of the cross-platform stuff he's been doing lately. But unfortunately, he was only available during Randy's interview, and he has other stuff this afternoon, so he's not going to be able to make it today. We're going to have him on hopefully next week to cover this. Another person that was going to be on for the regular news section, I don't believe he's on the call. I don't know if you can make it. Maybe we'll have a commercial break and see if he can show up. But Brian Weasler, some of you saw on Facebook, is selling a huge batch of CoCo stuff, 50 tubs full. I think his asking price for the entire lot was $5,000, but it's a ton of, fairly rare older items, magazines, books, computers, hardware, software, you name it. Now, that is for some people that were concerned. It's not that he's getting out of the CoCo market, because when he picked up this huge haul, he had 80 tubs. So he's still keeping 30 tubs worth of stuff, plus all his own stuff he already had. So he's not getting rid of it all. It's just too much for him. And he's got a lot of the stuff already as duplicates because he's been collecting for quite a while. So it's probably the largest single, besides the one he got this from the first place, it's probably the largest single lot of CoCo stuff you'll ever see. So if you have the money, the storage space, and are willing to pick it up from where he is, it's definitely good. If it doesn't end up going as a big lot, and it is a pretty expensive for a big lot, so I can kind of see if it doesn't, then I'm imagining he'll start, selling it off in chunks. So keep an eye out. If you're trying to get some older, rarer stuff here, it's a good opportunity. Hopefully he'll be on later today or maybe next week or something to kind of go through it in a bit more detail. I will try to throw it in the news here just to show a picture, because he's got a kind of a picture of some of the tubs on shelves and stuff. So those are two things to look forward to. And that's the end of the game on news.
Okay. Do we want to do a commercial break?
Yeah, I do a commercial because I need to top up my coffee.
Okay. Let me see. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
We'll return after these announcements.
In these difficult, trying, and uncertain times, the world has changed. The way we work, travel, and interact has gone digital. Tandy and Radio Shack have been using safe social practices and empowering people with technology to work remotely for over 4 decades. CoCoTALK has been meeting online with Skype, Discord, and Zoom to safely connect people for years. When you want safety, technology, and social collaboration, turn to Tandy, Radio Shack, and CoCoTALK, innovating by example.
The music is back.
The MIDI Maestro available now, only from Retro Innovations.
Go the number 4 retro.com.
Fletcher, I don't need that report tomorrow.
That's great, JT.
I need it tonight.
Oh, JT.
Fletcher saved over 300 clams, you dig, when she got her a Model 100 from Radio Shack, like a good little consumer. It's like a word processor, a phone directory and dialer. You dig, man? It even like, can groove with your office computer.
Fletcher? Fletcher. You'll go far, Fletcher. You'll go far.
Hello, I'm David Ladd. Thank you for watching CoCoTALK, the world's leading live CoCoTALK show.
Good day. This is Nick Marionettes. Crikey. After you buy Gunstar...
Stop right there.
Okay, fine. After you bought Gunstar, go ahead and buy your copy of the Coco Fest edition of
Nightmare Highway. Nightmare Highway.
It's a quarter of the quality at half the cost.
ESP 8266-01 RS232 TTL Wi-Fi network, 4-pin DIN, Fitbanger, DB9, PC IP, DriveWire.
In a world where hard drives rule and floppies are superfluous, one man, one legend, one old fart dared to learn the floppy and took the brunt of jokes. Then all hard drives and SSDs died, but the floppy survived. And the only man who knew floppies became a legend once more. Floppy Life, the David Ladd story. This summer, straight to YouTube.
8-slot MPI, floppy drive, CoCo SDC, Sound Speech Pack, Orchestra 90, RS232 pack, modem pack, Super IDE. You start adding all those together if you want them all usable at the same time. Well, guess what? You just went over the 4-slot MPI.
David Ladd.
Oh, I'm much happier breaking stuff.
From around the world, what you need to know. Get caught up on News with L Curtis Boyle.
And now a Muppet News Flash.
Take it away, Curtis.
I'm still getting used to being referred to as a Muppet. Okay, guys, seeing the CMOC screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Pierre Serrazin has released version 0.1.74 of CMOC, which has basically a fair bit of bug fixes. There was a bug with it working with GCC 11.2.0, some minor optimizations, and he's added some K&R C function definitions now. That part is experimental at this point, so I think he's waiting for some feedback from developers to see, if everything's working properly on that. And of course, the OS9 C compiler is also based on K&R too, so that actually helps with a bit of cross, operating system types of development too. So it's a free download as usual from Pierre. So go grab it. There's been stuff done on there's been games done, there's been utilities done. Brendan Don, he uses it for CoCo VGA development stuff too. So if you're into C and you're into the CoCo, it's a perfect solution. Next up, Ciaran Anscomb's released a couple of video audio demos with source code and bin files you can get from the Facebook CoCo group. So this is a 3-voice square music player. Now, normally he's been doing Sawtooth, which kind of has a rough edge to the music sound. And this more sounds like a typical sound card, a bit smoother. I much prefer this myself, personally. So the first one is demonstrating it on actual, just raw CoCo 3 hardware. And the second one is where he actually he's been fiddling with the Super Sprite board emulation in MAME. Now, I have read some comments afterwards. It sounds like MAME's playing it properly, but real CoCos are not at this point. So they're trying to figure out what's different. because it should work with the Mega Mini MPI, which is the same sound chip, and also the Super Sprite board itself. But currently, at least last I heard, and it's been a day or two since I checked on it, it only was working in MAME and not in real hardware yet. So, but the first one here is the actual regular CoCo 3 one. I'll just play a few seconds of that. But you don't get that grady, staticky sound. This is much smoother. To me, this is something I would prefer. And it still does not sound like the organ music we normally use to on the CoCo. So that's the one running on the 6-bit DAC. And then this one here is the one running the MAME emulated version of the MSX2 Super Sprite style sound chip. And this one, of course, I mean, it sounds pretty close because it's the same type of waveform, but this is taking way, way less CPU time. So if you have this chip, you can do a ton of background music stuff, and your game basically might slow down 5 to 10% at worst, and probably closer to like 1% or under. So I mean, we're looking forward to seeing where this goes. I'm also looking forward to seeing what exactly is going on between the MAME version of this driver and then the actual hardware. It's obviously something fairly subtle because they have tested that particular chip on other platforms in MAME and it works. And it works on the real hardware, so I don't know what the difference is, but hopefully they get that solved fairly soon. Next up, we got a couple of updates here from Bill Nobel. Now, we've been covering his little Teensy project here. So he's got a little video here. This is the first one he posted back on the 15th, where he mentions the ROM is in place, the MMU and video is now operational, and it's basically emulating a 609 with an MMU similar to CoCo's. So this is a brief little demo he did here, just showing it booting up and the screen running. And then he did a follow-up on that, where he's got some screenshots here, and he got a little bit further on it as well. We've got some of the graphics primitives working now as well with escape code style sequences, and he's also got full USB keyboard support. So you can see in here, it's welcome to Buggy version 1.1, which is something I should put on all my software. It's all Buggy. I've been talking about, the Teensy 609 by Bill, the original Simon 609 by Turk.
Hey, Curtis?
Yep.
That Buggy version 1.1, that's the actual name of the program, Buggy. And what it is Leonard Benschop's assembler, monitor. It has X modem built in. It's a fairly huge piece of kit.
Is it Buggy though, is the question?
The 1.0 was, which is why there's now 1.1. And if you run a diff on the source, which comes from the same archive, you can see what he was playing around with. And one of the things that was apparently buggy was there was no help in the first version. But,
I just like the name of that for a software project because it's like self-explanatory and self-referential.
But it's a pretty cool debugger. I've taken some part of trying to get it to run on the CoCo 3, but it's got a very particular memory layout that's used for these single board computer type projects, and getting that to run like alongside Color Basic or something. A lot of stuff has to be shuffled around, and I just haven't found the magic formula yet. But that is a really cool project, and everybody who's interested in assembly language and low-level CoCo stuff should take a look at it.
Okay, that's good to know. I didn't actually know too much about it. So is this the help screen from Buggy itself then we're looking at here?
Yeah, that's the 1.1 one.
I just want to know the strained acronym that comprises Buggy.
Benschop's Ultimate Grand.
Right.
Are you making this up as you go, or is there actually an acronym?
I'm making that up, but get there.
Now this here, I think, is more along the lines of what Bill's doing on it. So he's got the different RAM settings you've got and what your default paths, the memory size, whether it's emulating 639 or 609. He's actually got the hard drive images from Ease of Use loaded up there for the 609, including the user hard drive, which is cool. And he's got a couple of those too. That is cool. And then this is showing some of the graphics primitives. So he's actually got it drawing like filled rectangles and stuff like that on the screen too. So, and I think he's using escape sequences similar to the way that CoCo Nitrous 9 does as well. So it should be compatible. probably with some expanded, functionality beyond that at some point. But he's progressed quite a bit there in the span of the week. Speaking of 609s, for those of you who want to get a 609, Retro Rewind is now carrying them and has them in stock. And for those of you like me who can't solder to save your life and don't want to risk damaging, especially a CoCo 3 motherboard, because those are really expensive to replace if you screw them up, he actually is offering the service of installing them as well. So that now shows up on the hardware page at Retro Rewind. So in addition to the CoCo SDC with the case, you can now get a 609 CPU itself, and you can also get it installed. Send the computer to him, and for the the extra labor costs there, you can actually get it socketed machine and the 609 pre-installed for you by somebody who actually knows what they're doing, unlike me. So I know I sent a little message to Nick Marotta because he's always been leery about trying to ship his CoCo 3 across, to the States, and then worrying about customs losing it and all kinds of stuff. And this is actually only a 4-hour drive from him from Ottawa to Toronto, basically. So you might actually finally be able to get one here in the future. So big thanks to Frank for supporting the CoCo community and coming out of the gate running first with the SDC. Now he's got 609s. He's also got cap kits for various CoCo models from 1s to 3s and in between. So CoCos are not really infamous for having bad capacitors. I think our machines were manufactured before the quality of capacitors went really downhill. So ours generally tend to last. I've still got my CoCo 1. I haven't replaced a single capacitor, nothing. So, mileage may vary. I do know some people did have some problems with some capacitors leaking and stuff. So, but if you need a cap kit, he sells those as well. So big thanks to Frank at Retro Rewind. This one here, Baptist Hobb. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he has these little adapters here for using Atari-style joysticks, which is the 9-pin, I believe. So he's got another batch of these. He ordered them 20N. 6 were already sold as of January 19th, which is 3 days ago. So, and these will work with joysticks for the Tandy 1000 or the Tandy CoCo because they're pretty well identical, as Rick Euland well knows, since I think he got a bunch of PC Junior style ones. Do you still have a lot of those in stock? Or?
Yeah, I've still got a case of them. I haven't even bothered to convert yet. So I'm doing.
Well, in this case, maybe you can just, if people don't want to actually get it converted, they can actually just buy this and just plug it in, because I'm assuming it's the 9-pin connector on there right now, isn't it?
No, it is the weird PC Junior connector. I don't.
It's a weird.
There's something wrong with it.
Pin one. Okay. But for those of you who have Atari style, joysticks that are using a lot of retro platforms here, this adapter will let you plug it straight into the CoCo and run away with it. So if you have those joysticks already and you want to get an adapter to run into your CoCo, there's a whole batch of them here ready to go. So just PM Baptiste on Facebook in the CoCo group. Next up, John Linville. We covered this last week. He's working on a joystick tester. And now he's got his first video here showing a running prototype. He's already got some things he's got to fix. He discovered, that's typical when you're doing hardware, which is why I don't do hardware, because it costs money to get new batches of boards made when something goes wrong. But he's actually got it kind of showing here. Now I'm going to skip a little bit of the beginning here just to kind of show it in action type thing rather than, explanation of what has to get fixed, etc. So let's go to here.
See if I can keep this all in here. So here's a joystick wired up. And so if I go a little bit to the left, that first light on the left to the middle of that bar graph moves up, and a little bit more, the second one lights up. Go back to the middle, and you go back to the right. You see how this works, right? So not super precise, but it gives you something a little more than just yes, no. If you know these joysticks have a fine centering kind of position, and you can adjust them enough that it'll show up on one side or the other, but so you can sort of use that to center them if you care. But anyway, so I've got obviously up and down doing the same thing. Seems to work. And then what are the two in the middle for? Well, those are for testing the buttons. So you see I can press the button and the light comes on. This is one of the earlier models. It has looks like they molded the space to put a button, but there's only one button. So you can only test one button. The other button is the same circuit, just a different pin. So I'm going to take that as a positive test for everything.
So that kind of gives you some details on how this works. It doesn't do full analog, all 64 positions that you can visually see, but it gives you enough of an analog you can tell if it's not just hard left or hard right or hard up or hard down. So it gives you a little bit of, and that basically will tell you if an analog joystick's working properly, because if you can't go all the way to one side or the other, then you know you have a problem, obviously. Or like you mentioned in his talk there, the centering pots that allowed you to adjust, fine tune it left and right is actually enough to move it off enough center that some games that are very fussy on where their center point is may not function properly. I hit that in Downland, actually. I had to keep adjusting my pots as I was going. So I was quite familiar with this phenomenon. Anyway, he did mention there's a few hardware bits. I think something about the traces for these resistors or something was too small for the resistor type he was using or something. So he's got a few bits of redesign. But basically, this is just a proof of concept prototype at this point, and it seems to be working fine. So for those of you who want to be able to get into the testing of joysticks for Tandy 1000s or CoCos, because this is the same type of circuit, same type of joysticks, I should say. Once this project is done, and I'm not sure he's planning on selling this or if he's just planning on releasing it schematic-wise for people to make their own, but it obviously is working. Next, we have another follow-up video from James Jones. So he did a basic 09 to disk extended basic comparison, and it was more of a speed comparison last time. He was doing the knight or the queen's gambit problem, figuring out where you can place queens on a chessboard so that they don't hit each other. This one here is another one. It was based on an article for a CoCo magazine. I can't remember, 68 Micros or one of the other, later post-Rainbow ones. But it was basically how to figure out what kind of change you can get out of $1 and to calculate all the possibilities. Now, this one he approached a bit differently. He obviously runs Basic 9 versus Disk Basic again. And of course, Basic 9 kicks its butt. But he also then starts going into, there's more to coding than the language itself. He said the biggest thing for doing speed differences is to create algorithms that work better. Like try to figure out the problem you're trying to solve. Is there a better way of doing it algorithmically, like not brute forcing it all the time? And he goes through several iterations as he's going through here. And he actually gets both of them running much, much, much faster as he explains, if you do this and you can figure out that these certain checks you don't have to do because you automatically know if you think about it, they're not necessary. You've already proven from a previous step that can't happen. So don't waste your time checking for it. So basically the summary of it is here, and you can watch the whole video to show, the progression of the algorithms as he goes on, is that it ends up running between the original raw code based on that original article from the CoCo magazine back in the day, is that this basic one ends up being 135 times faster than the original just from algorithmic changes. And the Basic 9 one is 183 times faster. So as fast as Basic 9 is compared to Disk Basic and Microsoft Basic, he got more of a speed gain changing the algorithm on both of them than he did from switching between languages. So his point being, once you get a roughed out program running, see if you can figure out how it's working and how that algorithm can be improved as opposed to just trying to brute force, using an integer variable versus a real variable or something. Sometimes you get a much bigger speed gain just figuring out, stepping back for a second and going, that's kind of a dumb way to do that. If I did this, it would work a lot better.
You mean you can't just use bubble sort?
Exactly. Next up, Pedro Pena does a upgrade here of a 263134 Korean Coco 2. Now this came stock with 16K of RAM and color basic, no extended basic. So this kind of screenshots here, later on as it's fully running, but he actually goes through the whole process. Now, one of the interesting they did in this video is he actually had a few glitches. He forgot to solder because this is one of those CoCo 2 motherboards where the jumpers don't have actual jumpers. They're just, solder pads. So if you want to connect, the 64K, and he forgot there was 2 of them. So he left all the mistakes in. He figured that'd be a good learning tool for people, especially people that are kind of green to the CoCo type thing, that if you can see what the symptoms were when you forgot to do a step or did a step wrong, that you might be able to learn that if you see that same thing happen, you'll know, oh, that's what it was, because Pedro showed me what caused that issue to happen. Like the first time he did it, and he got everything in, he put the 64K RAM and he puts print mem, and it's still 16K. It's still 14,000 bytes. And what the heck? Because he had soldered one of the jumpers, but he forgot about the second one. And then he had some issues. He was trying to burn an EEPROM And this is one of the CoCos that actually has a 28-pin socket, but the original color basic ROM's a 24-pin. So you replace it with a slightly bigger chip to plug in. But the EEPROM programmer he was using had a couple of options for ROM chips, including one that was close, but not quite the same number of what he was using, and they're not compatible. So when he tried burning it, it just glitched out, did nothing worthwhile at all. And he goes through multiple stages of it. So, I mean, the fact that it's a 30-minute video should not make you think that this upgrade is hugely complicated, but he is letting all the mistakes filter through that you can see the progress of figuring out. It covers the debugging of doing stuff. So it's an instructional video, both from the point of actually doing the hardware upgrades themselves, but it's also a good tutorial on figuring out what went wrong, how to fix it, how to debug and just kind of go through and figure out your process and how to follow along when you hit problems. So it's a good tutorial on a couple of levels that way. Next up, and I hope some of you guys that use DriveWire more regularly, because I don't use it at all, might have some more insight into this. So apparently the DriveWire that has been floating around for a while, 4.3.4a, was the last officially released one. Now, Bill Pierce, who's been kind of like shepherding DriveWire, VCC, and of course he's got all of his MIDI stuff and stuff too, had received a private update from Aaron Wolf, the guy who did DriveWire 4, for 4.3.4e. This added some features. It took away some stuff. Some stuff wasn't fully baked in. Some stuff was partly implemented, but there was a lot of extra features too. And because Aaron has gotten busy with real life, et cetera, and it doesn't look like it's going to be ever coming back, because Aaron originally did not want this released until he got it finished. But that's, as he puts it in this article, Bill says, that's obviously not happened. So I don't know. I'm not that familiar with DriveWire's interface on DriveWire 4 here, but he was mentioning like some of the features here. So unlimited memory use, support for multiple instances, which he said DriveWire 4 always had support for it, but only available through complex command line parameters. And in this case here, he's actually got an instance manager where you can actually see all your different connections simultaneously as you're going through in the GUI. So it's a bit easier to use in that way. Vport sniffer, which he said is kind of roughly modeled off things like DED, et cetera. We can actually like watch the data transfers going between the DriveWire host and the client. We're making debugging. He said it currently only works with the MIDI and NX ports. It can be used with RSDOS, HBDOS, but it's on the ballgame and not be discussed here. I don't know any of the details on that. Sharing VHD and disk images across instances. Because if I remember correctly, the current one, once you've got an instance running and you've got a drive shared to one particular client, you can't share that exact same image with somebody else. And maybe that is still dangerous because they can both write to it at the same time, obviously. But if you're just trying to read stuff, it might actually be useful. The fact you can do it. And then it goes through the quirks, bugs, and missing features as opposed to the earlier version. Now, he's got the download here available, so you can grab it. And I didn't get a chance to look at it too close. I don't remember if the source code's in there or not. It is supposed to be an open source project, so I'm assuming that he probably does have the source. So any of you want to tackle that? Now, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe DriveWire 4, because it's still a Java DriveWire, requires an older version of Java installed on your machine. The current modern version of Java actually doesn't work with it. Is that correct?
I've updated my Java and DriveWire still works.
Are you running 3 or 4?
Now you're getting technical. I don't know.
Because I know 4 added a ton of features like the MIDI, the virtual windows, and all that kind of stuff too, which is more Nitrous 9 centric. But
are you talking about DriveWire?
Yes.
Yeah, DriveWire 4.
Okay, because I thought some people had said they'd been trying to install it, and it requires the previous version of Java, like 8 versus 9 or something. I can't remember what the exact numbers are, but.
Well, I don't know what version I had, but I did an update to Java, and it still works.
Actually, James Jones said, yeah, and Mikey both say, yes, old Java is needed. There's some old date-time class DriveWire uses. So the updates you're getting, Nick, are they like brand new major revisions to Java or just
I don't know.
updates for the older one? I'm wondering.
I just go into the control panel and I do an update for the Java, and it does whatever it does.
Yeah, Rocky just joined in and he said, yeah, I can only run it with Java 8, so it does not work in Java 9 or higher. So if you're updating Java 8, that's probably why it's working for you. But if you upgrade the major revision, it probably wouldn't.
Okay.
So keep your old one around, apparently. But anyway, I believe the source code is actually included in here. So any of you Java programmers here, maybe you can fix it so it works with the current date codes. Maybe you can fix some of these other issues that Bill mentioned. Finish up some of the stuff that Aaron had started, not quite completed. Then we might have another alternative as well as PyDriveWire type thing. Because PyDriveWire doesn't have all these features yet either, though Mikey's been actively working on it. And it's getting closer and closer, but maybe it'll be nice to have versions for both. Anyway, links for all these things are in the our Discord, in the news channel. So if you guys want to grab the links to these, you can go ahead and get it, or you can maybe try to read off the stream here. I'll bring this down so you can see sites, google.com, and where the barn studio from Bill Pierce is. And this was Robert Sieg's announcement about the videos he's been doing with his. And this was using the game Flipple as an example, which we briefly showed in the game segment here. But just getting into more to the technical details, the one video gets into how it actually interfaces with BASIC and how you use the editor from the Game Boy, etc. As well, the second video that has the actual gameplay samples and stuff here too. So, and here's one kind of showing animation tests. So this is one that was not on one of the other demos, but basically this is just showing alternating between a couple of these redefined characters to show you what that looks like.
That as well. Now you just run that and you put in a delay value. I've been using 100, and it shows you this bat flying across the screen.
But because it's machine language driver, and since it draws faster than even the extended BASIC on the MCX, et cetera, can do, it opens a possibility for some basic games that go beyond what you would have been able to do previous to this, and also much easier because it's basically you just write a basic program, you just redefine the character set, and then you just do print character strings to do these types of things. So definitely a very interesting project. If you've got an MC10, this is pretty exciting stuff, I think. And speaking of the MC10, Ciaran Anscomb did another update to XROAR. Now, since 60's actually in the chat, I think, you can probably give you a bit more detail on this. He said, but basically the MC10 cannot load ASCII BASIC from quote tape quote. I've tinkered about and added the sort of basic quick type thing that other emulators seem to have, which is basically almost like a cut and paste type thing where you're actually having the text get entered in as if it was entered in from the keyboard. And so I've not found much to test with it. Those are repo basic programs in ASCII format for the MC10. He was asking any questions there. But you can download this latest version, and he's been constantly updating like the CoCo 3 and the MC10 support that he added recently to XROAR. So there's, if you guys can help him out with some samples, et cetera, there too, and reporting bugs, et cetera, test it out for him. And he's in the chat. You also mentioned in the chat here, PyDriveWire may suffer similar issues Python 2 to 3, but I'd rather wrangle with those than Java. And Mikey says, I'm still working on the last Python 2 release of PyDriveWire. Then after that, we ported it to Python 3. So that problem might be solving itself because it's still active development. Next up, we have a follow-up in the Dragon world. So Chris Hawkins of Chris's Retro Corner, we covered this before Christmas because he'd required a Dragon with his wife buying it. And it had a couple little issues. The power supply was a bit flaky. Sometimes it turned on, sometimes it wouldn't. The one key was not working, which really screwed him up for some games, and especially picking color sets because all the dragons picked 1 for buff and 2 for green and 3 for pastel. And he could never pick the one color mode on almost every dragon game, so sometimes it looked horrid. So this one was more of a hardware go through and fix video. So he goes through and he figures out the problem and he fixes the power switch and he figures out the problem with the key and fixes that. And then he throws a little bit of Speed Racer game in there as a little bonus at the end. So I won't play it because we went through his entire 11 days of Dragon gaming before Christmas there, but some hardware type stuff in this particular episode. And then speaking of the Dragon, the Dragon PSU power supply board, the John Whitworth, the Dragonplus Electronics, had made a run of 20 a few months ago and then pretty well sold out within a month, if even that long, maybe just a couple of weeks. And he wasn't planning on doing these because, this is something that's a little bit, and Frank at Retro Rewind's talked about this when he's been on the show. When you start dealing with power supplies and selling stuff for power supplies, you have to start getting certifications from the various electronics groups in various countries because this could potentially be dangerous to somebody if you get a huge shock. So he's selling these in kit form because that makes it a bit more legal. Then it's up to the owner that buys it to deal with the fact they electrocuted themselves or whatever. But they've got another batch of these available now. It's in kit form. And from what I've seen, the Dragon has more problems with its power supply dying than the CoCo ever had. So this is probably a bit more useful for them than CoCo replacement power supply. We occasionally have it, but not as often as the Dragon had happened. Anyway, they're back in stock again in kit form. So if you do need a Dragon power supply, I'm not sure, and I don't know if he's even sure if there will be or when another run will be after this batch is sold out. So if you need one, I would go order it quick before they're sold out again. And hopefully you can continue to do this every once in a while, because there definitely was demand for it. And that's the end of the news. And I do believe we do have some project updates and acquisitions and things to talk about from some other people on the panel.
Cricket.
Yes. Let's see. Flip my screens around. Not that one. How about that one? On my list, I had CoComan. I had a project update.
Oh, I do. Yes, I do. Is this thing on? Hello? There we are. Okay.
Whoops.
Muted.
That's all right. No glitches, right? No glitches.
Your project update and acquisition, was you got a mute switch?
Yeah, that's it. I have a mute switch that works. Back to you. Now, what I have here is a little twist on something I've been doing here for a while, but as you know, as well, just a background, as you know, as most people know, I have the Joey high res switching system, and where you can switch between the 3 different controllers and the other port and the different high res modes. Well, the project here, I went ahead and I took that same board I'm using in the Joey high res switch, and I went ahead and made a more compact, just high res switch box here. So if you didn't need a switcher, you could just get a high res with an enhancement of a bypass switch. So
that goes between low res and high res, basically.
Yeah, it goes between low res and high res, and it's a quite a familiar form factor here. I don't have a name for it. This is just a preliminary label I use for something else, just to figure out what I'm going to label it. But don't have a name yet. I'm working on that. But yes, this is a bypass switch. Just standard Tandy high res mode. Just there's no switching on the cassette port. It's a simpler version. It's simpler to build, and if you don't need all that, if you don't need all those bells and whistles, and just to compare it as far as size wise to the original, this is the Tandy one here, and it's it's similar.
A little bit longer, a little bit thinner.
Yeah, okay. It's a little bit longer. It's a little bit thinner. Just happens to be the particular case I could get, and it does fit. And I'm using a panel mount connection on it, but just one port, one cassette. Just a neat little thing. But it'll be. I'll have them available here in, I don't know, probably a few weeks, give or take. If there's any interest, I'll put a few out there. But I still got to get the labels made up, and I still got to come up with a name. I'm sure everybody's going to ask, what Australian name is it going to be?
Right. Marsupial to be named later.
Right.
Well, I already threw one in, but I don't think that's going to work. Remember the A-Res?
I think so. Yeah. I did pick some folks' brains about what do you think of a name, and I have a whole list of them, but I haven't had a chance to really go through them or anything. But,
ooh,
yes,
Flippy.
I don't know. Flippy. Is that? Oh, well, was that Australian? Is there? I don't know. Flippy.
That's the Australian nickname for Flipper the dolphin, I think.
Oh, well, we have like Flippy discs, so I don't know.
And I made sure all the feature creep was covered. So
yeah,
I sent back a nice diagram of the 500 things you could add to that. So he went to go simplify a box, and I, of course, had to feature creep it already. So
yeah, it didn't work, did it?
I don't know. I'll keep sending it. We may eventually.
I'm not putting a real time clock in it. I'm not. I don't even think I'm gonna. I mean, it could do the CoCo Max mode, but I may add that may be an optional feature, but I'm not going to offer that by default. I think just since I'm going for a simplified version of it, and I'm guessing it'll probably be around the. If I have to guess a price, I'm gonna say it's gonna be in the around $40.
I like it straight up high res, as cheap as you can do it.
That's it, straight up high res with an enhancement of a bypass switch. Just bypasses the joystick. There's no cassette pass through or anything like that. It's just a stripped down version.
So in chat, Jim Rice suggests the Dingo or Koala.
Well,
Redback.
It's got to be a little mouse-like thing.
Mousy, some type of marsupial. Yeah, it could be. Now, koala. I've had the name koala suggested to me for different products, and I go, there's already the koala pad, so I kind of want to stay away from that. I said that's been done. It was done in the 80s. And
has platypus been used yet? Or
platypus? No, it hasn't. Does it?
Actually, is that even Australian? I don't even know.
I don't know, but this is not waterproof, so I don't know if I want to make it a platypus. Dingo. I don't know. Dingo. Does dingo have negative Australian annotations or?
Not really.
No, that's Dingbat you're thinking of it.
Oh, I was thinking like dingo ate your baby or something. I don't know what that's all about.
Right.
No, but to be named later. But that's it, and we'll keep sending those names. I guess.
I think the biggest project update on this episode, though, is going to be Mark Overholzer's beard, or lack thereof.
Yes.
Call it
Thank you for noticing.
The great chin of shame.
I have one minor update, and it's actually happening next week, but project update. So Jay Cyril and I are, of course, working on the Portapetsky robots with the CoCo 3. We'll be doing a status update on the International Computer Club on the Amigos channel next week, which is on the 29th. That's Saturday. Yeah, I think it is. At 4 p.m. Eastern is when the show starts. I'll be on with Jay later than that because I'll still be on here, I'm sure, by then. But we'll just be kind of an update status as to where we're at. So we have been making progress. We've been slowly ironing out bugs and crunching it to get more room to add in some of the extra routines we want to do. I'm getting pretty close to getting to the point of starting to do the dirty tile stuff to speed it up, because I've pretty well optimized the code as far as the graphics can go without redoing the entire way the game works, which I don't really want to do. But it's running okay. It's not running as fast as it should be, but the dirty tile thing will definitely help, because there's a lot of times where you move and floor tiles beside you are exactly the same. So why are you redrawing the whole darn thing every time? So that'll be one of the things that we shoot for. I don't know if I'll get that done before next week. Probably not, because I'm expecting to be a little bit busy with work this week, but there'll be a live update there on the show. So if you want to check it out on the Amigos Twitch channel, it'll be on next Saturday at, we'll probably be on between 5 or 6 p.m. Eastern, somewhere around there. Anybody else have any project updates, acquisitions? I guess Nick already gave his in the game on segment.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We're ready to call it quits?
Yep. Pull the pin, Jack.
Yeah.
All right.
There you go. Push the button, Frank.
All right. We're on the outro then.
This concludes another episode of CoCoTALK, the world's leading live talk show featuring the Tandy Color Computer, MC10, and Dragon systems. For all things CoCoTALK, visit us on the web at CoCoTalk.live. We'd love to hear from you. Send feedback, suggestions, even segments via email to CoCoTalk@CoCoTalk.live. Consider supporting the show with a purchase of merchandise from our retro swag shop at 8bit256.com. If you'd like to become a patron of the show, click on the Patreon link on our website, CoCoTalk.live. CoCoTalk would not exist without the community, its cast, crew, and contributors. Thanks go to Alan Murphy, Amigos Retro Gaming, Bill Nobel, Brian Joyce, Brian Weaver, Curtis Boyle, D. Bruce Moore, Danny O'Connor, David Ladd,
Eric Canales, George Jansen, Grant Leedy, James Diffendapper, Jason Reichert, Jim Brain, Ken Reichert, Ken Waters, Mark Bosley, Mark Overholzer, Mikey Furman, Mr. Dave 6309, Nick Marentes, Nick Marotta, Nick Marotta, Nick Marotta, Paul Fiscarelli, Richard Lorbieski, Rick Adams, Rick Hewlin, Rob Inman, Ron Delvaux, Samuel Gimes, Sloopy Malibu, Steve Bjork, Terry Steggy, Tom C., and many, many more. Please help support the CoCo community. A list of various contributors and resources are available at imacoconut.com. That's IMACOCONUT.com. The original CoCoTALK theme song is copyright 2008 by D. Bruce Moore and Greg Sheeler. The new CoCoTALK theme song is copyright 2020 by D. Bruce Moore. Both are mixed, mastered, and produced by D. Bruce Moore. CoCo forever!
Okay, any last minute notes?
Well, I will mention there's no special interview next week on the 29th. So hopefully it'll be early enough that I can get over to the ICC on time to do our presentation. But the following week, we have Scott Griepentrog of the STGNet BBS system, written for the CoCo and OS9. He's also involved with publishing of some magazines like Oscar back in the day. He's definitely a very big OS9 aficionado. So we'll be having him on to talk about his history with the CoCo and getting into some of the stuff that he did back in the day with the whole the network connected OS9 level 2 CoCo BBS system that actually had like 40 nodes at one point sending email and stuff back and forth, just like FidoNet, but all totally CoCo original. It's pretty cool. And a few more interviews I'm working on, but nothing to announce yet.
Okay. Well, let's say goodbye.
Okay. Bye and
Bye,
see everybody
everybody.
next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.